Well, I don't have much money, and I don't have much time, and I don't have many friends I could call mine. And I've been deceived, yeah, but haven't we all? I've seen the sun rise, and I've seen the sun fall. Well, I don't know why, and I don't know where, and I don't even know how, and I no longer care. But I've seen your face, and I've heard your call. Yes, I've seen the sun rise, and I've seen the sun fall. I've seen the sun hang like a flame in the sky. Yes, I've seen the sun turn, and I've seen the sun die. And I often think now, before our time is run, will there be any thoughts for what we have done? Well, I don't have much money, and I don't have much time, and I don't have many friends I could call mine. And when the night spills into the darkness of my soul, when the time comes for me to leave you, don't let me go. And you can call out my name, and you can call out my name.
Most pulpits are occupied by good men who are telling people to be good, and then they'll have a chance of heaven. But you know, the real gospel's not that. The gospel is for sinners. You don't have to be good to be saved. You do have to be saved to be good. And whosoever will may come, and all manner of sin and blasphemy shall be forgiven unto men. It's not who you are, it's whose you are. And you can come just as you are. He won't leave us just as we are. We don't have to worry about what God thinks of us. Only what he thinks of Christ, our substitute. When you hear the real gospel of the New Testament, the historic objective gospel that was preached by Christ and Paul, by Luther, by Wesley, then you know you have the verdict of the last judgment the moment you believe. You have everlasting life the moment you believe. You are accepted in the beloved. You're complete in him, despite stumblings, failures, 100 or more a day, not counted against us. Not one drop of the wrath of God can ever fall upon a believer.
Don't fall for the trap that people set up when they say it's not possible to keep the commandments.
Hello and welcome to another SDA Q&A. I'm here with my very special guest, Robert Woolley. How are you today, Robert?
I'm doing good. Thanks very much.
Great to have you on the show. And we've got lots of people watching. Moto Sapien says, let me see if I brought up the right one. Oh, the video's grainy. Yeah, look, there's something wrong with my video this end, everyone. I'm really sorry about that. He also adds, now just stop rubbing that mug in my face, Pete. I'm going to have to make a bootleg version. If it didn't cost like $50 to send to the States, Motor Sapien, I'd send you a free one. Well, my guest today, Robert Woolley, who was once a Seventh-day Adventist, has left the Adventist church and become a Catholic. Now, a lot of people would think about that as being quite a momentous, or what's the word for it? Quite a significant thing to do, because Adventists traditionally have been all about anti-Catholic, the Sunday law's coming, the Pope is the Antichrist, this kind of thing. And so I'm imagining, as we chat to you about your journey, Robert, that we're going to hear of a time period when you were like, oh, a bit cautious about what you might have been heading towards and into.
Oh,
So we'll get to that point. Yeah, we'll get to that point. We chatted off air. I asked if you were related to Patty Woolley, who I know, and there's a relative of hers somehow, Danella Waters, who's a really great Australian singer, and she used to live here in Cooranbong, went to the high school up here back in the day. But you're not related to her or the Woolies. That I think one of the Woolies was the manager at the Sanitarium Health Food Company, another one down in the Signs somewhere. So the Woolies are a big family, but you're not connected at all to that family?
No, as far as I've been able to ascertain, I'm not.
Right. Okay. So that doesn't matter. You're your own individual on your own interesting journey, and that's what we're going to chat about today. In the opening there, I was, reading It's Okay Not to Be a Seventh-day Adventist by Teresa and Arthur Beam. They've been on the show. You've been on their show, and I encourage people to go and check that out. It's called, what's the name of their show now? What's the title of their?
It's escaping me.
Yeah, isn't that terrible? I've been on the show. You've been on the show. It's a great show. Teresa, if you're watching, just refresh my memory. I didn't mean to do that to be offensive. Gives us a chance to talk about the show again and send people your way. Okay, so Robert, over to you. Tell us a little bit about your childhood as a Seventh-day Adventist. We'll start way back there.
Way back. I'll go back just a little bit further than that.
Yes.
So my father, my mother, and my grandmother on my mother's side, they converted to Adventism in the early 60s, the late 50s, early 60s, at a tent meeting in Newcastle, one of those good old days kind of events when you'd put a tent up and people would come and listen.
Yeah.
My dad was Church of England, although I don't think he was terribly devout. My mum and grandmother, they were Methodists, and they were looking to leave because even in the 50s, they were finding the Methodist Church was getting too liberal for them.
Wow.
So that's probably going to set a little bit of a background about how my mum embraced Ellen White as time went on. So, but once they converted to Adventism, they were all in. Dad immediately got involved, and soon he was a Pathfinder leader and a teaching Sabbath schools and a church elder. He really got into it. And then so when I come along, my earliest memories are really memories of like Sabbath school and going to church. And yeah, so I grew up in I'd say a strict, devout Adventist home. In some regards, mum and dad were great. If at any point today I come across as being ungrateful to them, I apologize, because I had a loving mum and dad who did the best they could for me and were always looking out for us kids. Mum was much stricter than dad was. So dad still enjoyed his meat. So we were never like the vegetarian strain of Adventists. But mum liked the vegetarian side. So we had plenty of nut meat and gluten steaks and all the favourites. And then maybe once a week there'd be some meat in there to appease dad. So we're one of those kind. I could watch TV. Dad would take me to the movies. But when it came to the Sabbath, we were very strict. That was where we had to, we knew what time sundown was. Everything had to be done by sundown. TV would have to go off. Toys would have to go away. And would be like that until Sabbath had finished the next day.
Yeah.
So we would, Friday night, I would, I can't remember what I did on Friday nights when I was really little, probably just went to bed early. But when I could read, I know we had the Testimonies to the Church by Ellen White, the 3-volume concordance index to her writings, plus other writings. And as soon as I could read, I started reading those books on Friday evening for some reason.
Just some light reading.
So some light reading, yeah. Not quite sure if I understood much of what was going on, but they were there, and I started reading them. I love going to Sabbath school. I really like Sabbath school. That was fun. Didn't like the serving. That was a drag. That's normal for kids, I guess. We go home for lunch, and my both grandmothers would come over. We'd have Sabbath lunch. That was a special time. In the afternoon, every other afternoon, Dad would take us back to JMVs, which, for those who don't know, was it used to stand for Junior Missionary Volunteers. It was like an afternoon program for young people.
Yeah.
Or if you're an adult, there's a thing called MVs, which was Missionary Volunteers. And we'd go back. There would be you'd do study Bible stuff, do quizzes, have songs, listen to speakers. I quite enjoyed that. And on the off weeks, because we did it every other week at my church, the off weeks, Dad would always be taking us, somewhere approved for Sabbath, a nature walk along the beach, as long as the water didn't come past your ankles, that kind of thing. So that was good. I actually kind of liked those activities growing up. Things started to where I'm up to now. One thing that troubled me, though, I'm not quite sure why. Even from a very young age, I didn't want anybody knowing I was an Adventist for some reason. Not quite sure why. Every Sabbath morning, we were the only Adventists in our street, and the rest of our street, I guess you'd call bogan, quite a bogan kind of street, very irreligious, going to the club, going to the pub kind of and those were my friends. Those kids. There's a lot of kids in our street, and there were 2 Catholic families, one next door, one across the road, and I was friends with them too. And they were quite different to the rest of the street. But it'd be time to go to church, and I'd, have my Sabbath school lesson and a Bible, and I'd be walking out to the car. And for some weird reason, I'd be thinking, I really hope they don't think I'm going to church. I'm sure they weren't thinking anything.
Yeah.
Nobody's peeking out their window wondering what I'm doing, but I would, I just, for some reason, I didn't want anybody to know what I was doing. So anyhow, I carry on. I start learning Ellen White kind of stuff. I read the Bible stories, Uncle Arthur's Bible stories and bedtime stories. So yeah. I learnt my Bible that way, and Sabbath school lessons. I did not learn it from the Bible. And many years later, when I finally did read the stories in the Bible, I was kind of, hang on, they've left some details out of the story here in the Bible. That's kind of probably says a little bit about my mind and how I developed as an Adventist. Mm-hmm. It came from sources outside of the Bible.
Yeah.
And like I said, Dad was pretty chilled about things, but although he was, a committed Adventist and he kept the Sabbath holy and all that. But Mum, she was very concerned that we do it properly.
Right.
She would tell me about, Ellen White says you have to guard the edges of the Sabbath.
That too.
Guard the edges of the Sabbath. We can't be doing our own pleasure. That's from like a little bit from the Bible there. So pretty much don't have too much fun unless it's Bible felts or Bible stories or nature walks kind of thing. I didn't play with my other friends in the street on the Sabbath. If sometimes I'd get invited to a birthday party of one of the kids in the street, and if it fell on a Sabbath, Mum would buy a present for them, and I'd take it up on Friday and say, "Here's your present. Sorry, I'm not allowed to come to your party tomorrow." So I'm starting to develop this kind of I'm different kind of mindset.
Yeah, a bit of an us and them.
You kind of. And I would read Ellen White's books about how do I keep the Sabbath, because I was of the understanding that I really needed to do this properly, and I felt bad because my heart wasn't embracing the downtime. If I was doing something, Sabbath school, church, JMVs, I was good. In the downtime, I was not doing good. Mm. So I'd read her books and I'd say, and I found she has lots to say about what not to do on the Sabbath. Her advice for what to do on the Sabbath, what I read was do something wholesome. Mm. She gave very strict guidelines what not to do. I wanted her to tell me what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she's becoming my go-to person of what to do, what not to do. So where am I? In my childhood, when I started school, I went to the local Adventist school, which was a very small school. It was a primary school and high school, and there were about 80 students.
Was that the one in Hamilton?
That was the one in Hamilton, yeah. And there were about 80 students in both parts of the school, the whole.
Cool. And what time frame is this? How old were you and what year was it?
Okay. So I was born in 1969. Mm-hmm. So those early years is like the early 70s. And then I started school, I think, 1976. So yeah, off I went to Adventist school, and that's where I probably started feeling more different, because my other friends were going to the local public school, or the Catholic kids were going to the Catholic school.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I went to my school, and I quite liked the school. I had good friends there. Still friends with some of the kids from that time. I liked the teachers mostly. So schooling wasn't bad. I didn't mind going to school. High school got a little bit difficult. Not difficult, but not quite so keen, because I would have liked to have done some other things that were not offered at the school, because there's very limited choice in what we could study. But that's all right. But while I was in primary school, life went on. I'd go to school, I'd come home, go out, play with the kids in the street. We'd play street cricket and all that kind of stuff. And that'd all go good till Friday night when, oh, the sun's going down. I've got to go home now.
Yeah.
And off I'd go. And it was the the secular friends, I could tell they were kind of like, why do you have to go home now? You know, they would ask questions. The kids, the two Catholic friends I had, they would, oh, okay, off you go. No worries. They were more understanding.
Right.
Now, this was a little bit strange to me, because Mum was very, very, very anti-Catholic.
Yeah.
Even before she was an Adventist. She when she'd say the word Catholic, like, well, Catholic, you know, and if you know, she would see someone on TV like Mike Walsh, the old TV host.
Yes. Yeah.
He was Catholic. And I remember once she was watching the midday show because she liked it, and Michael said, I'm a good Catholic boy, and kind of Mum's, there's no such thing. And then later on, Ray Martin became the host of the same show. He was also a Catholic.
Yeah.
And Mum's kind of like, oh, I can't believe he's a Catholic. He's a nice guy. You know, if she met a nice Catholic, she would be shocked. She'd be shocked. That was the kind of, so I was picking up this vibe all along that, you know, Catholics are really bad.
Mm.
And this really puzzled me, because the two Catholic families were the nicest families in the street. And when I started high school, things kind of went really weird for me. Most of my friends suddenly refused to play with me. You know, I'd go and knock on their door. You want to come out? No, I'm not coming out. Do you want to play cricket? No, I'm not going to play cricket. And I really never played with them again. I don't know what happened. It's almost like a memo went around the street saying, we're not playing with Robert anymore.
Wow.
It was really weird. Except for the two Catholic boys next door and across the road.
Yeah.
They continued to be my friends. Yeah. So I still don't know to this day what happened.
Yeah.
But it went really weird. So I'd hang out with the Catholic boys, which is starting to make me wonder, because I know that Catholics are not good.
Yeah.
Yet these are the ones that are still
Are they
playing.
trying to trick me? Are they trying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was kind of weird. And I knew they would go to mass, and Mum would, mass, you know, that's, you know, pagan, you know, we're going to mass, you know. She almost spit the word out of her mouth.
The pagan ritual.
Yeah. So those friends stuck by me with all the time, but I become kind of reclusive then. I didn't go outside into my street, because I didn't want to bump into the other kids in the street. So I spent a lot of my high school years actually shut in my room or out in the backyard. Or just if I could get across to my Catholic friend's house without seeing any of the local kids.
Wow.
Yeah. So we're kind of, this is probably not, this is my mind. I can't really blame Adventism for this. This is just how I'm putting it all together.
Yeah, that's all right.
Yeah.
But you can obviously tell from just hearing the story that the ingredients of Adventism were firmly going into the recipe of Robert Woolley's life.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've looked back, and I think the problem might have been I was ashamed of being an Adventist, because I was, but I didn't know why. Yeah. I couldn't explain why. I didn't know why. I knew I was an Adventist because Mum and Dad said so, but I never. How can I say it? It's going to sound terrible. I never loved Jesus. I would say I did. I thought I did. I wanted to please him, but I didn't love Jesus. When I'd start to meet other Protestants, and they would say, "Oh, I love Jesus so much." I'm kind of, "Oh, really? I wish I could."
Yeah.
I wish I could, but I really didn't know how to,
Interesting.
because by this stage I was really I did start reading the Bible, Daniel, Revelation. They were the books I read.
Yeah.
I'd read the Gospels just for the stories. I wouldn't touch anything Paul wrote. That was kind of boring. Went over my head. I didn't get it. So throughout my church life and Sabbath school, I'd picked up prophecy. I'd picked up the second coming. I picked up how to keep the Sabbath, how not to displease God. But somehow I'd avoided developing any relationship with God. Why do we love God? It's rather, how do we not displease God?
Displease God. Yeah.
Yeah. So going back to, I know during my primary school, when I was in grade 3 and 4, I think I had a lovely teacher. I won't mention her name because I think she put a lot of this into my head.
There's a few people watching who I know went to Hamilton School as well. I even taught there as well in the early 90s, I think it was.
Right. So I was gone by then. But my grade 3 and 4 teacher in 1977, 78, you might know who she was. She was a lovely, lovely lady. But I think she told us a lot of unbiblical stuff, even by Adventist standards.
Yeah.
I remember her saying, when we go to heaven, the only thing we'll be able to take to heaven is our character, Ellen White, and our Bible.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'm thinking, hang on, really?
Yeah.
Well, if she says so. So okay, yeah, that seemed a bit strange to me, but I believed every word that came out of her mouth because I really loved this teacher. But she must have talked a lot about the time of trouble and things like that, because I remember at lunchtime, me and my friends, we started training for jungle life. We used to play on the monkey bars, escaping the Catholics that are pursuing us. We'd talk about the cave we're going to live in.
Yeah, the baked beans, the nut meat cans.
All that. So we started prepping for the end times in primary school.
It was palpable, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah, we really believed it.
And I knew we had to run to the mountains in the time of trouble. But in Newcastle, there are not a lot of mountains.
You got to come out to Kurrambong.
I know. I thought I've got to go quite a way, and I don't know where any caves are. So that was a legitimate concern of mine, which mountains I was going to run to.
It's funny, we laugh about it now, but at the time we weren't laughing about it. It was serious. Like, we used to go for bushwalks up into the Wadigans here, which are kind of mountains. Yeah. And literally, you'd be having a nice Sabbath afternoon walk, but someone would say, hey, look, there's going to come a time when we're going to have to run up to these hills. We need to start looking for some caves and stuff. And it was really, I think at that time, 7, 8, 9, it really concerned me. It worried me. It spooked me.
Oh yeah, I was terrified of getting taken away from mum and dad.
Yeah,
that, like, as a child, I already knew that children would be separated from their parents. So that really, really scared me.
What a terrible thing to say to teach your kids that going to be separated. Get ready.
And there are two things that stand out to me from this time. The first thing I can ever remember from a church sermon, it was 1978. It'd have to be 1978, because I'm sitting down there not listening. I don't know, half listening, drawing on bits of paper, because drawing on paper is an approved church activity. I remember seeing some other kids with Matchbox cars, and I thought, how on earth did they get away with that?
Wow.
But yeah, so this suddenly I hear, who knows, maybe Jesus might return in 1979. And I felt my heart stop. And I thought, oh no, you can't. This no, it can't be so soon. And I remember for the rest of that day, and a long time after, I was just, what if he comes in 1979? I'm not ready. I'm 10 years old at this stage. I'm just not ready. And then another thing, which is really weird, at some point I got into my head that one day a voice is going to boom out of heaven saying, "It is finished."
Yeah.
I think it might be an Ellen somewhere. Like there's going to be a loud voice saying, "This is probation's closed," or I might have misinterpreted, but this is what I was thinking. So one day probation will close, and the voice will say, "It is finished." So I'm probably mixing up two things here. And I remember walking home from school. It's a hot day, and I'm looking up at the sky and thinking, "Is this voice going to come on the way home? Am I going to hear the word 'it is finished' on the way home?" And I'm not ready. So they're two things which kind of stood out to me in this fear of the end times. So
can I just jump in there, because
sure.
I was in Kurrumbong in 1978, and we had a guest minister speak. Our church was the Ordo, we used to call it. It's now the University Auditorium or whatever, big basketball kind of place. And that preacher said something about 1979 as well. So I wonder if there was something going on around then, a bit of a like a campaign to let's rev up our members and start potentially mentioning dates indirectly.
Oh, who knows? But I certainly
you
noticed
literally
it.
lived about 40 minutes from me, and you heard it in a sermon, and I heard it in a sermon, and I was biking home up the hill thinking the same thing.
Yeah, I don't know how the rest of Australia was, but I feel Newcastle was quite a conservative area for Adventism back in the day.
I think the rest of Australia too.
Yeah, I didn't know the rest of Australia. I knew my church. I knew a couple of other churches in Newcastle, and I knew Kurrumbong.
Yeah,
I know when I was a kid, we would come down there for those
big youth
rallies, or before youth rallies, like the regional meetings
Yes.
down in that old auditorium where they had the regional meetings.
Remember it very well.
And I'd come down to them, and I used to quite enjoy that because we'd go over to Ellen White's house, which apparently is just down the road from you. And
that's down from me, yeah.
And we'd go in there and we'd see her little prayer closet.
Yes.
Which I know it was never a prayer closet, but and I'd look at this very holy house, and we'd go into the little South Pacific Museum there, and I used to think I'm almost in the New Jerusalem here. I mean, imagine living here where everybody's Adventist and you don't have to hide who you are.
Yeah.
And then one day I saw somebody riding a bicycle during the Sabbath, and I thought, what? They ride bicycles down here on the Sabbath?
Yeah.
Gee, we don't do that up in Newcastle.
And back then, about 70% of Kurrumbong were Seventh-day Adventists as well.
Yeah, I know. So I really thought it would have been great to live there, and I wouldn't, I could be me perhaps.
What was interesting, just jumping in again, around 1979, I was in year 10, I think, year 11 in 79. And in 78 and 79, the school opened up to anybody to come, not just Adventists. And there was a real influx of non-Adventists who had no idea about Adventism, couldn't give two hoots about it, were partying on the weekends. And I remember it kind of within a few months even of, I think it's kind of began around the middle of 78. And again, this is my memory, but I just remember it wasn't like that before. Like you go to school and everyone was an Adventist and we'd all play together, and it seemed like this kind of utopia you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I knew we had the Memorial Church and the College Church, and one was a bit more liberal and one was a bit more conservative, but we all got on pretty well. But when the influx of the secular community came in, it had a huge impact on the culture of the community for all of us. And I think it actually was a bad decision for the division or union or conference to make, because it really, like by the end of, like I remember in 79, late 79, I was the good Adventist boy, no drinking, no smoking, no drugs. And I remember driving, must have, well, I had my license. I must have been the 1980, might have been year 12, driving down from the shops in Kurrumbong down towards where the community centre is now. And there's like 6 or 7 people in the car smoking and drinking and doing drugs, and I'm just driving down. I was the driver, and I remember thinking, wow, Kurrumbong has changed a lot. And I don't think that culture remained there for a good 10 years. And it kind of decimated a lot of connections. I know a lot of my friends left the church around that time. They had the whole Ford fiasco. It was a big schism for young Adventists. And we weren't old enough. You're younger than me, but we weren't old enough to fully comprehend what was going on. So we had all the cool hip youth pastors leaving in the early 80s. We had this influx of secularism into our education system, and we were still scared to death about the end times and the time of trouble. That 78 to 84 time period was a young Adventist at that time were kind of left to hang in the wind, I believe.
Yeah, I can remember a couple of people. Our church, I know there were a lot of concerned brethren at our church. I was familiar with the term.
Yeah.
Didn't really know what they were, but I was quite familiar with the term.
Yeah.
And I knew there were concerned brethren there. And I remember one afternoon after the JMV program, a couple of members, at least one of them was a concerned brethren.
Yeah.
And another man almost come into fisticuffs over some guy called Ford.
Yeah, interesting.
I had no idea who Ford was.
Yeah.
But at that moment, straight away I knew he's bad news.
Yes. Yeah.
Whoever this guy is, and whatever he's done,
Yeah.
it must be pretty bad news.
Yeah. Yeah.
So talk about an influx of non-Adventists. In my high school, we had quite a few non-Adventists, and some of them were actually Christians, non-Adventist Christians.
Yeah.
And that was something new to me because I hadn't met them before, and I become friends with them. And they knew their Bible pretty well. Some of them. And during Bible class, they would bring up texts which would kind of seem to go against Adventist teaching, like clean and unclean foods and some Sabbath texts and things like that. And I would argue with them, but in the back of my mind, I was like, this is
pretty solid.
Yeah, it can't be right. Clearly, it can't be right.
Yeah,
but it sounds right.
Yeah, because
So
we've got the truth.
Yeah, I'd spend a lot of years hearing that and thinking, no, I'll go and see what Sister White says. I would, if I ever had a Bible problem, I would go to that index that we had at home, look up the index, find the answer, because if she says so, that's good enough for me. Yeah, I was not an Ellen White lover. I did not like her at all.
No.
I wish she didn't exist.
Yeah,
but she was there. She was God's messenger.
Yeah,
and if what she said clearly went.
Yeah, she was an authoritative guide for us, you know.
Yeah, she was an authoritative.
Back in those days, and those watching, please comment as we go along if these stories resonate with you. But a lot of people back in those days would say, "Well, what does Ellen White say?"
Yeah,
you talk about anything. Well, what does Ellen White say?
Yes, exactly. And I was one of those people who would go and see what Ellen White says.
Yeah, I think,
and that would do it for me. I was fine. So yeah, I was starting to read her bigger books. I know everybody loves Steps to Christ. I could never get past the first chapter.
Yeah,
still haven't read it. Like I said, I didn't love Jesus. I wanted to. I just didn't. I couldn't get into Steps to Christ. I love The Great Controversy. That was a good book. I'd be reading, all the stuff about the Inquisitions and the papacy and the last days. I couldn't get enough of that, even though it terrified me. I don't know why you go back to something that terrified you, but that was what my religion kind of was.
Yeah.
So when I participated in Revelation seminars and things like that. So looking back now, I could barely call myself a Christian, I guess. Thought I was, but I wasn't. And I knew we had to tell the world, but how do I tell the world this when I wish I didn't know any of this?
Wow.
I know it's my duty to, but yeah. Anyhow, so where do we are? We finished high school, and after high school, in my life, there's only one thing I ever wanted to do. I wanted to join the Air Force. Yeah. Didn't want to be a pilot. I wanted to work on planes. I wanted to fix airplanes, pull the engines out. And that was what I saw myself doing from a little kid all the way up. And I knew that was something I could not do. 2 reasons. One, back then, Adventists just didn't join the military. 2, you'd have to work on Sabbath.
Yeah.
There's no way around it. So that was out. I knew I could never do that, but I could never think of anything else I'd like to do.
Yeah.
Also, I wasn't too worried because I didn't think I'd ever get to that point. I thought the world was going to end.
Anyway, yeah.
Anyway, so the chances of me ever having to get a job were remote, or get married, or have kids, or have adult life. I really thought the world was going to end before I got there. So I really didn't care much about preparing for it. I was too busy preparing for the end rather than
for the life.
What happens for life.
Yeah, yeah.
So I finished school. I didn't know what to do. So I decided to go to university. I applied for an arts degree and got accepted. When I started, university was still free. So it really was no big deal if you just went and did nonsense.
Yeah.
So I went to university for 3 years and I did an arts degree. Met, for the first time in my life, mingled with non-Adventists or people who, before then, I was with Adventists or people who knew Adventists.
Yeah.
Now, for the first time, I'm out in the world with people who don't know what an Adventist is. Still, I would not tell anybody. I still didn't want to let anyone know who I really was. But I become friends with a few people and started to realize they're actually normal people.
Yeah.
That's a bit weird.
Yeah. A shock.
Then I'd meet Christians who are quite normal Christians. And I'm thinking, these people are quite different. I hope this doesn't reflect badly on a lot of the Adventists I hung out with, but I thought these seem like real Christians.
Yeah.
Is this what Christians are? Now, looking back, there were a ton of wonderful Christians in my church. I just I wasn't looking for that. I was looking for other things. I was looking for doom and gloom. I wasn't looking for joy or gospel or things like that. Looking back, I think it was there because some of those old pastors, I've talked to them later in life, and they're good. They preach stuff. They do preach the gospel as far as the Adventists preach the gospel. I just managed to avoid it a lot of my life. But I'm still carrying on. Nothing's really changed with my spiritual outlook. I finished university, still don't know what I want to do because I've got the same thing. I knew if anything that I'd be interested in would involve Sabbath work. And I didn't want to let anybody know that I was an Adventist.
Yeah.
I kind of felt like, I don't know what I felt. I thought something would happen if anybody ever knew. So here I am, I'm like, how old am I? I'm 21 years old and I'm weird. So I was involved in church And one day I had to go up to the conference office to drop in a
Can I just jump in? What
Yeah.
church were you going to?
Wall's End,
Wall's End. Okay.
the old A-frame Wall's End
The
church
A-frame one there on top of the hill.
on
Yeah.
top of the hill.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that was
And
that church.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay. So carry on. Then you went up to the conference
Yes,
office.
I had to take something up the conference office, and I dropped whatever it was. I dropped it off, and while I was leaving, there was one of the youth pastors saw me, and he said, "Hey, Robert, what are you?" Somehow he must have known that I was finishing uni. I guess I was starting to talk to a few. Then he said, "What are you doing next year?" And so I don't know. So he said, "Have you ever thought of being a student missionary?"
Oh yeah, here we go.
And I thought, "No, not really."
Can you say who the pastor, the youth guy was?
I
at the
wish I
time?
could remember. No, I
Yeah.
can't remember who it was now.
Yeah.
This is 1990.
Okay.
So, and he said, "Look, yeah, here, let me show you a book." So he opened this big book of all the different opportunities to be a student missionary,
Mm.
and he's kind of flipping through all the pages, and he flips it over one that says Japan, and straight away I thought, "That's it. That's the one." Yep, I don't know. I just knew like that.
Yeah. Going to Japan.
So, actually, I'll do that. So I just went home and said, "Mum, I'm going to Japan next year." And you are? Really? Okay. How's this going to work? And it did. Yeah, I did. I ended up going to Japan as a student missionary. Strangely, when I started uni, I did one semester of, no, not one semester, 1 year of Japanese. One semester, I did all right. And the second semester, I didn't. And at the end of the semester, I said, "Yeah, you passed, but please don't come back." And my Japanese bit ended there.
Oh.
But here I'm going to Japan. So I went to Japan as a student missionary, and then found out, what am I going to tell everybody? What am I going to teach people? English class. We had to teach English classes. That was fine. We had to do Bible classes. When it came to Bible class, I can tell Bible stories, or I can talk about the time of trouble. I don't think time of trouble is a good thing to share with these people. We'll do Bible stories. So I did the Bible stories, but I wasn't being a missionary. I was being a storyteller. I had no idea how to be a missionary because I didn't know. I had nothing to give to them. But I had a good time. I had a good time there. Looking back now, I was such a bad missionary. I wish I could have done better, because I looked at some others who were, once again, they had fire in their heart, and I didn't have that. So I did that for a couple of years. Then a friend who was over there working in just a regular English, like a private English school, said, "Do you want to come and work with me?" And I did. So I continued working over there, met my wife, and got married. So going to Japan was very pivotal part of my life.
Isn't that funny though? From just to go to the conference office, pastor says, "Hey, have you thought about here?" Flicks the book, go to Japan, and pivotal change to your life.
My life changed on that one moment.
Yeah.
If I hadn't gone up there that day, who knows where I would have gone. But I believe things are ordained. I think that was ordained.
Yeah.
So and then I've, Japan's been a part of my life, since then. I've spent several years on and off living over there, going to church over there. I went to the church over there, and that was another thing that started to make me wonder, because they would have church lunches, and they'd have a box to put money in to pay for church lunch. And I thought, what? I know at Avondale you could buy meal tickets for your lunch, which I thought was cheating anyhow.
Yeah.
Why not just pay with a credit card? That's not cash.
Yeah.
But I saw them putting money in there, and I thought, I couldn't understand that culture could play a part in religion. especially paying for your lunch on the Sabbath.
Yeah.
That was, and yeah, that, and they would, when it came to eating seafood,
Yeah.
they could be a bit flexible in the interpretation of what was biblically acceptable. I know, like I said, we ate meat at home, but if we ever had fish and chips, Mum used to drive me mad. She'd be asking me if it's got fins or scales, this fish. So okay,
You'd be embarrassed asking the local takeaway person about that, because they'd go, I don't know.
Does this have fins and scales? No, I guess so. It's a fish, isn't it? You know, yeah. After a while, I just didn't want to have fish and chips anymore.
No, just chips, thanks.
Yeah. So I'm getting a bit of a culture shock that people can do Christianity or Adventism differently.
Yeah.
I thought the way I did it was the way it needed to be done.
Mm.
But then I had heard about how in America they don't even wear wedding rings. And I thought, well, that's going a bit bad, because everybody I knew had a wedding ring over here and nobody thought that was wrong. I'm really struggling with all this kind of different thoughts.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyhow, I'm going on. I'm probably not really a Christian, but I know Bible stories. I do good in Bible quizzes. I know how the world's going to end, and I know I'm not ready.
Mm.
And I'm thinking I really need to. I need to serve God. You know, I knew I was a bad missionary in Japan. I've got to do it properly this time. I've got to serve God somehow to kind of, if I can serve God, maybe I can pull it all together.
Mm.
And around about 2005, I guess it was, a literature evangelist came to our church, trying to, recruit people. And I'm listening to this and I think, this is the way to serve God. Man, I don't want to do this. I really, no way. I do not want to go to door to door, because as a kid, through the late 70s and early 80s, we had to do appeal for missions.
Yeah.
We had to knock on the door. Hello, I'm here to collect money for the poor people, and I'd show them the brochure and somebody give me 20 cents and I put it in my bag and off I'd go.
Yeah.
And then they changed it to Adventist appeal. Oh no, what'd you do that for?
Yeah, I know.
And yeah, so I was used to knocking on doors and I hated it so badly. But I thought, look, maybe God's testing me. God's calling me. He's giving me something hard to do that I don't want to do. I've got to step out of my comfort zone. So therefore, this must be what God wants me to do. So I signed up and I became a literature evangelist for a little while.
What year was this?
This is 2005.
Right.
And so how old am I? Like 35 years old now. 36, something like that. And I sucked badly at a literature evangelist. I was so bad. Because one thing, I didn't like what I was doing. I thought it was really shady. We'd be trying to sell them $1,000 library of health books, Dr. Wright's health books and other health books, and a copy of Your Bible and You by that was Arthur Maxwell, wasn't it?
I think so.
Yeah, and that was like a part of the package, and I thought, all we really want to do is sell them this Your Bible and You. We're basically charging them $1,000 for this one book in the hope that they'll read it and become Christian. Because that was the one that we were encouraged, this is the book we want them to have. Like all of the other books, they were good books. I think the Dr. Wright books are pretty good, and some of the health books were all right. But I felt bad that we're really here trying to give them this one book.
Yeah, and you're saying $1,000? Like, was it a series of that?
The set, we wouldn't sell them individual books.
Yeah,
we sold them a library.
That's right.
And they would pay a bit. We give them a book, go back the next month, give them another book, and then we'd want to try and evangelize them in that time. But I wasn't very good at it. I didn't make any money. We'd go to housing commission areas. Housing commission, they're really quick to sign up for books.
Oh,
Yeah, they'll invite you in, they'll sign up for them. Then you'll have trouble getting money out of them,
right. Yeah.
but they'll sign up for them initially.
And was it like a lay-by where they'd have the books and just have to pay it off?
No, they'd pay me some money and I'd deliver a book.
Right.
And next time next week they'd pay some more money and I'd deliver them the next book, and I'd go back and do the next book.
And what was your commission on a book sale?
It was about 50% we were suggested we take.
Right.
And I felt so bad that I started selling them at cost, which is not really good for making a living, because this is how I'm trying to make a living. I just felt so bad about it.
Yeah.
But I did find, if an old person would answer the door, they'd often invite me in for a chat or sit on the veranda and chat. And I'd end up chatting to them for half an hour. I wouldn't sell many books, but we'd just have a lovely chat for half an hour. So I'm not making any money. I'm kind of losing money because I just couldn't do it. And another guy I was working with said, look, if you seem to get on well with old people, so why don't you find a job where you can work with old people? And I thought,
who said that to you?
Another literature evangelist I was working with.
Right.
We were doing an area. He was kind of teaching me the ropes of how to do it.
Right.
So I thought, okay, that sounds better than what I'm doing now. I've got to find something to deal with old people. So I thought, maybe I could work in aged care. So I went and did a course to become an assistant in nursing with the intention of working in aged care. And I'm telling this bit of the story because this is where my life changes as far as Christianity goes. So the course I was doing was run by a man who used to be a nurse, used to work in aged care. And he was like the most beautiful Christian I'd ever met. And he would work Christianity into these classes. They were secular classes, but he'd work Christianity into it. And I'm starting to hear really, really beautiful stuff about Jesus, about salvation, through this nurse aged care course. And for the first time, my heart's starting to feel, I think I know what these loving Jesus is. So yeah, it was a start. And I talked to him and I found out that he was actually he was attending the Walls End Church, which is now up on Lake Road, up the top of the hill there, the new one.
Yeah.
But on Sunday, because another church was using it on Sunday. And he said to me, yeah, I looked into becoming an Adventist, almost become an Adventist, but I just couldn't get over the legalism. And I'm saying, legalism? We don't have legalism in our church. It's just keeping the commandments. This is what you...
Yeah. That's what the Bible tells us to do.
So now I'm seeing a new side of Christianity, and also I'm starting to realize that the legalism part's starting to become apparent to me. So I had to, as part of this course, I had to get do a placement. And when it was time for placement, he said to me, look, Robert, I don't really see you in aged care, but I think you'd be really good working with disability. So he said, go call this person, and they'll let you work there to do your placement. So I called them and I said, yeah, sure, come and work here. And it was good. I loved it. I finally found a job that I really like doing. And I'm still doing it now. I've been doing it for 18 years now.
Right. But this is now in your late 30s.
I'm 30. I think I'm 36 now. So I remember I did my placement and they offered me a job at this place. So I took it and I've been working for the same company since then.
Right.
And I started working in in the house, so I'm sorry, I don't want to use terms like industry terms. I started caring for people in a group home, but they also had day programs where people would come and they'd take them out into the community, and I moved over into that section. So I started going, picking people up, taking them out for the day, helping them do whatever they wanted to do. And there was one lady I'd take out. She liked listening to Radio Rima, which is the local Christian radio station. So I'd put Radio Rima on in the van while we're driving around, and I'm happy to listen to it too. There's some nice songs, and between the songs they would have little tiny snippets of preaching, you know. And I started to listen to it, and this is where I'm starting to hear, I'll call it Orthodox Protestant Christianity.
And you're still going to the Wall's End Church?
Oh, yeah, still going.
Not the pointy one anymore, but over where the conference office is.
No, over where the conference is now.
Yeah.
I'm going to that one. And I was doing Sabbath school lessons there and things like that. I was a bit involved there. So I do a lot of driving around, and I started putting this Radio Rima on all the time when I was driving around and listening to it. And I'm just hearing about, you know, what's grace. Grace. Yeah, I heard the word grace before. I knew grace was involved. Asked me to define grace, I wouldn't know. Never cared to think about it.
Yeah. So
now I'm starting to learn about it, and I thought, this is good. This is good. This is what Christianity is. So I started incorporating it into my Adventism. So I never had any intention that I would not become an Adventist. I was thinking, you know, okay, so this is what I've missed. You know, clearly it's been there. I've just missed it.
Yeah.
With my focus. So and then I start listening to they have pastors speaking late at night doing sermons, like non-Adventist pastors, other Protestant pastors. I'd listen to their stuff, and it was so good. And I'm starting to think, how come these people don't get the Sabbath?
Yeah.
They're intelligent. They're so smart. Their sermons are so good. Why are they oblivious to the Sabbath?
Yeah.
Is it because they've never looked into it? Like me, you know, I've never looked into grace. They never looked into the Sabbath. So it was really starting to mess with me. And this is where I'm starting to question Ellen White, because they're saying things, they're reading bits of the Bible. It's all making sense to me. This doesn't sound like what Mrs. White had said. So I'm starting to wonder, not doubting her, starting to wonder why I'm getting her wrong. Anyhow, I started incorporating all of these things I'm learning into my church life, like Sabbath school lessons and things like that. And I was quite happy. It was good. I was happy to be a Seventh-day Adventist. From this point on, I'm happy to tell people I'm a Seventh-day Adventist Christian, and it's wonderful. And this is the gospel. And then one day Jesus coming. Yeah, it's going to get really bad. But this is, for now.
We'll focus on this.
Focus on this. And around about this time, I moved house. And I would still go to Wall's End Church. And I did for 2 years, till one day I was walking around the block and I realised there was a sign on a Uniting Church on the next block from where I live. And it said, Adventists meet here Saturday, 9:30. And I thought, what? There's a church here? I didn't realise that. So I went along and I found out it was actually a church company.
Right. Where was it again?
In Raymond Terrace.
Right.
Which is kind of weird. This is where I've done a lot of my literature evangelist work in the past before I moved here. So I started going to this church, and there are about, I don't know, up to a dozen people going. And on most occasions, I'd be the youngest one there. And but I really liked it. They were great. We'd do Sabbath school. By this time, I listened to sermons. I really enjoyed listening to sermons. They asked me to do Sabbath school classes, so I would do Sabbath school classes, and that was good. Then they said, "Do you want to preach a sermon?" So I said, "Oh,
Wow.
yeah."
Who was the pastor running the company?
We didn't have a pastor running the company.
Right.
It was basically an elder was running it, and we'd have guest pastors
Coming in. Right.
coming
Sorry
in.
to interrupt. Go on.
No, that's all right.
I just like these little details because I'm in the area.
Yeah, we have. So we eventually did get a pastor, and like all things, his name is escaping me right now.
Yeah,
He's a Fijian guy. He's a great guy.
Yeah.
Had tattoos on his knuckles.
Right.
Why can't I think of his name? I don't know. I'm getting dementia.
Right. No, we're meant to be following the story, not the people in the story.
Yeah. So I was quite involved. I would do sermons, and my sermons, every sermon I did, I wanted to be, this has got to be about God's grace. And I would use Ellen White in the sermon because I knew you got to use Ellen White in the sermon. I just find one of her quotes that fit what I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
And with her, there's always a but somewhere. I would leave the but out. I just do the first bit. And I was really enjoying my Christian life, my Adventist life. I wasn't ashamed of who I was anymore.
Mm.
And my mum and dad started coming to that church because they liked it up there. And it was really good. And then one day somebody come along and we were told that they were going to close this church down as a company and they were going to start a church plant. But they,
okay.
Yeah,
so
to have a church plant.
Yeah.
But they couldn't just carry on. It had to be, to do it, you had to completely
dissolve it. Right.
Dissolve it and start again. So, and I was invited to become part of the church planning team.
Right.
So I was very happy to do that.
Now, I'm going to pause you there for a second. When we're an hour in, we often have a 5-minute break. And this sounds like a pivotal and this sounds like a pivotal turning point. So we're going to have a 5-minute break. Pause that moment. You're invited to become a part of this plant. I'm excited now because you're on board with Adventism. You got a view of the grace there. You're working Ellen White into it. I want to know how you then switch from that to where you are now. And we will talk about that in 5 minutes. Those watching, share a little bit in the comments. If you are a former Adventist, where did you go from there? Just, say Adventist to Baptist or Adventist to give us a name of the movement that you're perhaps involved with at the moment. My guest today, Robert Woolley, and we're chatting about his transition from Adventism to Catholicism. Wow, spooky. We'll be back in 5 minutes, everyone. Go and make yourself a nice hot cuppa and come and join us for part 2 of this incredible conversation. See you soon.
You love me so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deeper than this world will ever show. And all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, 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 I will never be the same, never be the same ever again. Here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, and all of the love we feel will save us anyway. And I will never will never be the same, will never be the same. Oh, I will never be the same, will never be the same ever again. Love me so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deeper than this world will ever show. And all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, never be the same ever again. Here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, and all of the love we feel will save us anyway. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Oh, I will never be the same, will never be the same ever again.
Hello, and we're back with my special guest, Robert Woolley, who transitioned from Adventism to Catholicism. We're at a very interesting part of the story there, Robert, and I know you're waiting to get your earbuds back in, but that's okay. I'll just quickly bring up some comments that we've got here. Yes, Andy, glad you're watching. Yeah, I said just before the break, if you write from Adventist to something, did you kind of go from an Adventist to something, or limbo land, or nothing, or like me, just enjoying being a human and gathering with like-minded people at local cafes? Let's see if other people have written some of the thoughts. Oh, and thank you, Rick. Rick has put, don't forget to like the video, everyone. It really does help. If you just lean forward right now, if you're watching on YouTube, just click the like and subscribe button. If you're watching on Facebook, just click like. And don't forget, if you're watching on the Facebook group and you'd like to have your comments come up on the screen, you need to go to our Facebook live public page. It's called SDA&A live public page. And I've put a link in the comments there for you to go and join. And Angela has written that she went from Adventist to Calvary Chapel, is now her home. But Robert went from a very interesting story, Robert, of your childhood through Adventism into adult years. And a lot of people can feel and relate to some of the things you're talking about. Time of trouble, not totally getting it, feeling a little bit embarrassed about your friends actually treating you a bit differently when they kind of find out. That kind of thing is a theme that does run through a lot of former Adventists when they share their stories. You're at a point now where you're feeling comfortable, you're in your mid-30s, you're about to become involved with a new plant, Seventh-day Adventist Church plant.
Yeah.
You're teaching grace. Moto Sapien said earlier, what's your view on grace now? We'll come to that. That's a good question. How is it different to this time period? And you're using Ellen White, cherry picking the good bits out, and you're kind of finally finding a sense of place. So continue on with that story, because I'm very interested to know what happens next. How did that sense of peace and finally landing get scuttled?
Okay, so yeah, I'm involved in the church plant. Really loving that. Involved with the pastor who'd been given the duty of establishing it. We had a great relationship, and my wife was there, my two kids were there, my sister came along, her kids came along, my mum and dad had come along.
Wow.
And my family actually made up half of the congregation at one point in our new church plant.
Yeah.
And when I was a kid, I used to look at like these dynasties in the church, the great families that run through, and I thought, I'm the dynasty now.
The dynasty of Raymond Terrace.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was good. I carried on. I was doing Sabbath school and doing some sermons here and there. And we started getting some interesting Sabbath school topics coming up on Galatians. And I thought, oh, good. I'm looking forward to this, because this is where grace comes from. So I did that lesson, and this is where I started to get really discouraged, because the lesson, the first couple of days would be really good. And then the last couple of days would be, but we mustn't forget the law. So,
right.
It says this, but of course this must be taken in context of the law. And I noticed that every lesson for that quarter, it finished with but.
Yeah.
Started good, and it finished with,
yes,
let's not forget the law.
Yeah.
And, on the Friday in the lesson quarterly, it's always something from Ellen White. That's how you finish the week, a quote from Ellen White. And sometimes they're all right, and sometimes that was the last thing you remember. It was a big but.
Mm.
So that's fine. I'm only going to do the first half of the lesson during the Sabbath school lesson. And I'd get members wanting to do the second half of the lesson. And I started to feel a bit of tension in the Sabbath school classes with what people wanted to focus on. And look, Sabbath school lesson, I never thought of myself as a teacher, because you're a facilitator, you want to get the discussion going. But I kind of thought, well, let's just do this, I'm going to facilitate it in this direction where, because these people, maybe they haven't learned what I've learned yet. Maybe they're not. So I'm starting to feel this tension. And then we did another quarterly, I had a similar thing. I started to notice all these buts. There's a good bit, but there's always a but. It's always coming back to the law. It's always coming back to the Sabbath, really. It's always coming back to the Sabbath. But I understand there's different points of view. There's tensions in churches. I'm just starting to notice it more, probably because I'm more involved. I'd never been involved in church politics before. Not that this is really politics, but I'd avoided all of this. And then I noticed the next quarterly is going to be on the sanctuary doctrine. And I was excited about this because I knew the sanctuary doctrine. I could tell you how it works, but I'd never seen it in the Bible. I'd never sat down and studied it through the Bible. I assumed it was there like everything else. I assumed it was there and it all come together. So I was really looking forward to this quarterly. And this quarterly did not answer any questions at all. By the time I was finished, I had more questions
than answers.
So I thought, well, I've got to kind of sort this out for myself. So I started looking into it. And this is where I started to find that there's actually a controversy within the Adventist church. Because this guy called Ford, who I'd heard about when I was 10 years old, he had something to do with it.
Yeah.
And this is where I start to kind of really see that there can be opposing views in Adventism. And so I thought, well, I'll look into it. People from other denominations had taught me stuff, so maybe the opposing side within Adventism can teach me something. So I started to look into it. I listened to the Glacier View recording, and by the time I'd finished that, I was convinced that Dr. Ford was correct.
Yeah. This is for those watching, this is the October 27 forum meeting that Des was invited to take there in the States, 1979. And it's what led to the Glacier View kangaroo court. And if people look on YouTube back, maybe, 10, 15 episodes, I've released the whole of that recording there. If people want to go and hear what you're just talking about, it's 1 hour, but it covers a lot of ground and raises some incredible viewpoints and opposing views to traditional Adventist thought on the sanctuary. So you heard this tape.
Yeah, I'd already done research. I'd read stuff, but I kind of had an idea of what the different ideas were. But when I listened to the presentation, it was that kind of clinched it for me.
Yeah, interesting.
And that creates a huge problem because this is directly contradicting Ellen White.
Yes.
There's no way I can harmonize this. And I've been very black and white with Ellen White. So if she got this wrong, she's not a prophet.
Yeah.
She just can't be a prophet.
Why do you think it is that so many people who love the Des Ford message got to that point that you got to, but they are able to harmonize Ellen White, even Des Ford himself, post Glacier View, seemed to harmonize her work and her as a good person, an inspirational messenger even. Why do you think they are able to do that?
That I don't know. I think I don't know. It's I guess it's how you saw her before you get to this point.
Yeah. Okay.
Like I was pretty much of the opinion that basically God whispered in her ear everything.
Yeah.
Like I'd read all those letters she wrote to members, secret letters, God showed me that you've been doing this bad thing and you have to stop and all that. And I thought, so God's kind of talking to her in the night, I saw, Mr. Brown, committing this sin. I want you to write a letter to him, rebuking him for this sin. And I just thought, everything she heard come from God.
Yeah. And I don't know how people, like, I think you've raised a great point. It's how people saw her before they get confronted with this Des Ford message. Let's say there's other ways. A lot of people come to that without ever having heard of Des Ford as well. But those who do, I just don't know how you can be an Adventist. People have said to me, well, that wasn't my perspective. I just don't know how you can be an Adventist and have never entertained the thought that most of what Ellen was saying and writing about, particularly in the testimonies, like you say, when she would rebuke people, she would say that, God's told me to tell you this, and God told me to tell you all about the sanctuary and to confirm that what we're saying is correct. Surely there's a moment where they can entertain, I can see what Robert's saying there. But for some reason, even if they had a watered down version of that, they still seem to be able to harmonize Ellen into the picture.
Yeah.
And I did that too for 25 years, so I can't talk.
Yeah. Well, no, I couldn't because I'd, like she was, she talks both ways. She said, God showed me everything. And then she says, no, he didn't. She has a bit each way. If she'd said, like, this is a vision from God and everything else, she hadn't claimed that everything comes from God, I would have been fine. I can accept that a prophet can get things wrong. I can accept that a prophet can not even be a friend of God. Like in the Bible, you got prophets, they go up to say one thing and they prophesy something else. Was it Balaam? He had to curse Israel, but he had to praise Israel.
Yeah.
But that's not how I saw it. So I guess I came from that direction, which made me really question it. So I had to kind of dig into this a little bit now. I had avoided it because, like, about 10 years previously, my sister had looked into Ellen White and left the church. And I did not want to look at anything she'd looked at because I think I was worried about what I might find.
Right.
So I just avoided. But now I started, before I went there, I went to some pastors and said, look, I'm having this problem with Ellen White. Can you help me? So, and they did. They said, look, she was a woman, sure, she made mistakes, but, here's a book. I think there's a book I think it was by Graham Bradford. I can't remember the title, but it was kind of like.
Oh, yes, I know the one.
Yeah, I read that book. And it was making a case that, you can accept her as a special person, and yeah, she's God's messenger, but yeah, she got things wrong. If I'm remembering the thrust of the book correctly.
Yeah, that's the thrust of it. Yeah, she was flawed and human, got things wrong.
Yeah.
But you don't get the central pillar doctrine of the Adventist Church told to you from God wrong.
Yeah. So I coped with that for a little. I accept, okay, right out, fair enough. You're a pastor, you know more than me. And there was a very good pastor too. Very good pastor. A lovely Christian guy.
Lovely guy. And a big fan of Ford's work too.
Yeah. So that helped me for a little bit. But then I thought, no, I've got to see what the other side has to say. So I know before I come to that, I got onto one of your SDA People's Voice Facebook group.
Yes. I remember you joining and asking lots of interesting questions.
Yeah. So that really made me think that in one way, some people helped me harmonize a lot of stuff into Adventism. And in another way, they left me with lots of questions because first time I'm seeing people questioning Adventism. People who were Adventists now talking about how they used to be. I hadn't really been there before. So that was that had a profound impact on me. But I got to the point where I had to I left the group because I couldn't process it all anymore.
Yeah, I remember.
There was so much going on. I thought, I just don't know what to do. I can't process it.
Yeah.
So I went off and I started exploring what the internet had to say about Ellen White. And it didn't take very long for me to not think that she's not a prophet. I started to thinking she was maybe working for the other side. You know, I thought, if you're not inspired by God, you're crazy, or you're inspired by the devil. That's the kind of where I'm starting to think. So I've done like I said, I've never been a huge fan, but I always thought she was God's mouthpiece. Let's call it that. So I start reading a lot of the weird stuff I hadn't heard of. The very early days, the crawling on the floor, screaming, the green coiled up rope. I knew some of the stories from school, but I didn't. There was a lot of weirdness in there. Then I learn about the shut door. I hadn't heard about the shut. And I'm thinking, this can't be right. This really can't be right. And then I finally read about the test of the prophet in the Bible. Before then, I think the church has got like 9 tests of a prophet. They've got a list of all these different things to prove you're a prophet. And it's like everything else in the church, it's all been put together from here and there. But then I see there's actually only one test of a prophet in the Bible. If they say something and it doesn't happen, they're not from God. And she said too many things that didn't happen. So I thought, she's not from God. She's just not from God.
Can you just share a couple of those things if they come to your mind? Or,
okay.
A lot of people say to me, well, point out one, and I go, oh yeah, okay.
I've heard you talk about it on your show before, but it's the food for worms, where
that's a big one, isn't it?
You cannot say this is a conditional prophecy. She said, in this room at the second coming, some are going to be here, and like some are going to be dead. Yeah, but there are people going to be in this room that are translated. Yeah. And they died. Every single one of those person died. Yeah. It's very clear. I can't see any way to.
And the Adventist apologist would say, oh, well, that's where she made an error, and she meant to say, unless you do this. But then if you add a condition to it, you're then saying that you have the ability to bring about the return of Christ by behaving the certain way. So either way, with that particular vision, you're just getting yourself into hot water. Either way.
Yeah. Another one is she predicted the San Francisco earthquake in 1904. That's a famous one. But if you read the whole thing, she also predicted Oakland would be destroyed too, which is a city nearby. Oakland wasn't destroyed.
I think the 1908 San Francisco one, she was actually in the rubble visiting the place, and she said, I saw this in vision a couple of weeks ago. I think I might be wrong, but I remember reading that and going, hang on a second. Yes. Can you please have, if you want to really prove your predictions, you got to kind of say them publicly beforehand. Not, oh yeah, I saw this. We could all be prophets under that. And we could all be prophets if we have conditional not occurring conditional.
Yes, exactly.
Caveats.
So there are a couple of the ones that she did, and there were the shut door thing, because she had to open the door.
Yes.
The fact that they had to open
wasn't fully shut. It was ajar a little.
Yeah. So I got to the point I decided, she's a false prophet. And I don't believe in the investigative judgment. But I still believe everything else in Adventism. I kind of still believe everything she's prophesied, because I could see how it comes from the Bible. People have interpreted the Bible. I can see how 1844 was derived, even though I don't really believe it anymore. I can see how the dates worked. I can see the 1260 days and the fatal wound of the Pope and all, the Catholic Church and all that kind of stuff. So I can see all that. So I still kind of believe all of that. but now I'm pretty sure that the IJ, investigative judgment, is not correct.
Mm.
And Ellen White is not a true prophet.
Mm.
So I went to the pastor. By this point, I was an elder in the church, and I went to the pastor and said, "I can't be an elder anymore. I don't believe the investigative judgment."
Mm.
I thought, no, I just can't. I didn't want to leave the church. I just thought I can't be an elder.
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, look, don't be hasty. Don't be hasty. I'm sure we can work something out." And I went and talked to a couple of other older pastors. Older pastors have been really helpful.
Mm.
All retired pastors. Maybe that's a coincidence. But they said, "Oh, no, there are plenty of people out there that don't believe in the investigative judgment, and they're pastors and they're elders. Don't."
This is a common thing they say, isn't it? Yeah.
Don't stress about it. Just go in there and do some good. Do what you've been doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I went back the next
Shine your light.
Yeah. So I went back the next week, and I said, "Look, I've talked to some people, reconsidered. Yeah, like I'm happy to stay on as an elder." And the pastor was, regarding that, no, it's not possible. And I was taken off the teaching roster. I was taken off the preaching roster. I was taken off everything. So I suspect somebody, it got mentioned, and somebody higher up said no.
Mm.
So
particularly during this time where the North New South Wales Conference, of which Raymond Terrace is under, they were becoming more and more conservative. They were kind of being taken over by an independent ministry. Lovely people, and they focused on doing good things.
Yeah,
but they were definitely trying to root out anyone that didn't believe in the sanctuary doctrine.
Yeah,
and didn't consider Ellen an authority.
So I only suspect this. I do not know. Maybe it didn't happen that way, but that's things change, and
it's typical. It's whether it did or not in your case. It's typically the way it does happen.
Yeah. So now I'm just back to like a normal church member, which is fine. But I've started down this path. I've got to.
Yes. Yeah.
I've got to keep going. So okay. So let's start looking at all the church doctrines, and if this is wrong, what about these other ones? Okay, let's start with the big one, the Sabbath.
Wow.
So I started looking into the Sabbath, and I start finding all kinds of things. Okay, can we keep the Sabbath on a sphere? What about the international date line? What about lunar Sabbaths? Have we even got the right day now?
Yeah.
And then I start learning about New Covenant and Old Covenant. And as far as I was concerned, the New Covenant is Old Covenant renewed now with Jesus. It's not really a new covenant. It's just an extension of the old covenant. Even though it's called a new covenant, I never really saw it as that way. It's just a continuation. And then I start to see how the Sabbath, we're taught Sabbath is in Genesis. God sets it aside in Genesis. And when you go back and look at it differently, God does not set it aside in Genesis. God rests on the seventh day. And it says he hallows it. He never tells anybody that this is now every seventh day you have to worship me on this particular day. It's just something God did. God stopped his rest then. And there was never an end to that day. So that God's rest from creation as that Sabbath is pretty much continuing.
Resting in Jesus.
And then we don't hear about the Sabbath again till in Exodus, just before Sinai, when they're going out to collect the manna, and God says, "Okay, you got to collect twice tomorrow because the weekend's going to be the Sabbath." And I'm thinking, well, I'm not thinking. This is what people have said. These people didn't know what the Sabbath was.
Yeah.
God is telling them something's coming up. This is a new thing, and it means you got to do this because this is going to be a day of rest. And then we finally get the Sabbath is a covenant with part of the covenant with the Jews, the Israelites at that stage. and it's part of their covenant with God. And it's in there in the Ten Commandments, and it was written on stone. But then if you read the whole chapter that Ten Commandments in, they're in the middle of a whole bunch of commandments. And as far as I can see, everything was written on the stone, not just the 10 commandments, all of them, front and back. So there's just not that list of 10. And there's not a halo around the Sabbath, the fourth commandment, as Ellen White says. So I'm starting to be convinced that, yes, the seventh day Sabbath was special to the Jews. And now I'm really struggling. This is starting to get really stressful. Oh, I've missed a very important part, very, very important part about all this stress. Before this investigative judgment happened, my father, who said was part of the church, he got melanoma and he was gone within 4 months. He went very, very quickly.
Oh, whoa.
This was back in 2018 or 2017. And he went for a couple of months. He was okay, but he started to have trouble talking, controlling his emotions. And apparently he's having lots of little blood vessels breaking in his brain all the time.
Right.
So it's starting to cause lots of things, almost like little strokes.
Yeah.
And like I said, his emotions started coming out. He would cry about things. He'd start crying about, lots of stuff that happened in the past that I'd never seen him do before. And he knows he's dying, and he starts to, have I been good enough?
Wow.
Have I been good enough?
Yeah.
You know? And I'm, no, this can't be how you end. So we've got to talk him, we've got to say, don't think like an Adventist. You've got to,
Yeah.
God saved you, you've put your trust in Christ, in his sacrifice. And the church pastor and a visiting evangelist, they both came over and they anointed Dad. They said the same thing, and that seemed to do the trick. I think he got peace there. Good. And very soon after that, he reached the point where he really couldn't speak properly anymore. He was still here, but he'd kind of gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, he died shortly after that. But the fact that he found himself in that situation really it was terrible. I couldn't believe that you can be a good Adventist all these years and be like this in your final days. When death's approaching. So that this doubt in the value of Adventism, I think that kind of started. And then so that's why I hit the grace harder in the Sabbath school lessons. And
right.
Yes. Sorry, that was kind of an important point.
Pivotal. Yeah. It's something that really influenced what was going on for you in this transition. Yeah.
So Dad's gone. I forgot where I'm up to. I'm looking at all the different things. I've decided that the Sabbath is not as we've been taught. Then what about the unclean foods? I'd already decided that was wrong a long time ago. And that's one thing. Okay, Ellen says this. I think she's wrong, but it was such a kind of a small thing to me. I just pushed that aside. Didn't worry too much about that. Not that I started eating unclean foods. I just decided that the church's teaching was wrong. So a few things had been chipping away here and there. I'd read something about tithing I think it was in the Review and Herald or something like that. It was a Q&A thing. And some old lady said, look, I don't know if this is a real question or there's something they put in there, but it said, it's a long time since I've tithed. I really want to tithe again, but there's all these years I haven't tithed. Do I have to pay back tithe?
Oh, right. Yeah.
And I was ready for the answer. It's kind of like, no, just start again. And the answer was, well, in this situation, if somebody has a piece of property, they'll sell the property and then they'll use that money for tithing. And I'm just like, no, you can't say that. That's extorting somebody from that. That can't be right. So I went into that, sent me into see what the Bible says about tithing, and I decided the Adventist view of tithing is not the biblical view of tithing. So I've got all these little things chipping away.
Yeah.
And I get to the point where I pretty much think the Adventist church is not God's church anymore.
Mm.
But I'm taking my mum to church.
Mm.
Dad's gone. I've got to pick her up, take her to church. I'm sitting there with her in church. So I thought, okay, I'll just listen to the sermons, because the sermons, I won't go to Sabbath school. I'll stop going to Sabbath school. But I'll take her to church. I'll sit with her in church. And I'll just listen to the sermons, because the sermons are pretty good. But all I could hear was Ellen White. They weren't quoting her, but I could just hear it. Of course, I guess of all the research I've been doing, that's not the Bible, that's Ellen. That's not the Bible, that's Ellen.
It's Ellen. Wow.
It's just infused. I don't even know if the pastors knew they were doing it. It's just in there.
Yeah.
And I started getting crankier and crankier.
Yeah.
It must be you could see it on my face, because the pastor eventually came and said, "Look, Robert, I love you coming here, but you look so angry over there. And if you don't want to be here looking like that, I'd really rather you didn't come."
Yeah.
If you don't want to be here, he's like,
yeah.
He said, "I want you to come, but if you don't want to be here,
Yeah.
and be like that, please don't come."
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I left, and I've never been back. That was it.
Yeah. When was that? What year?
That was about 2020.
Yeah. So this is all fairly recent sort of stuff.
Yeah. So I'd pick mum up, take her, drop her off, come back and pick her up. And this was really hurting my mum, because as far as she's concerned, all of her children, because one sister had gone, my other sister had kind of stopped coming, and now I'm not coming anymore. I haven't told her why, because she was also had some strokes. She couldn't really communicate very well. I'm sure she could understand, but if I wanted to talk to her, it was really hard, and I didn't feel right to kind of go in there and kind of try and tell her why she's wrong and I'm right at this time.
Yeah.
So, and she didn't say this to me. She said this to one of my sisters. She said, I had another sister who only lived for 5 hours. She was born when I was about 6 years old, 5 or 6 years old.
Right.
And she only survived for a few hours. Oh. And Mum said to one of my sisters, and it says, "Look, I've lost 3 children, but at least I've got one child that will be in heaven."
Whoa.
That was the...
wow.
This was reported to me from my sister. I didn't hear these words, but she apparently said it. And I thought, that'd probably be my mum's thinking. Yeah. And I thought, this is terrible that she feels this way.
Yeah.
All of her children have apostatized and are doomed, because that's how I used to think.
Yeah.
That's how she still thought. And now that's making me think, have I apostated? I'm an apostate now, aren't I? What does this mean for me? I still believe in God. What do I do? Yeah. I guess I start looking into other churches. So I started going around. Raymond Terrace has got a bunch of churches within walking distance from my house. Yeah. So I just started visiting.
You'd moved to Raymond Terrace during that time as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So so I went to Baptist church. That didn't do it for me at all. Went to Salvation Army. That was all right, but once again, I don't know. I was looking for I don't know if I was looking for the truth. I was looking for where I felt comfortable and had the truth, I guess.
Right.
And I ended up at this community church, and it was great. I really loved it.
Right.
Their preaching was just fantastic. They would get the Bible, they'd open up a book, and for the next 6 weeks, they'd read through a book of the Bible.
Right.
And just preach on that. They weren't skipping all over the place, and then they'd do another series, and I was really liking it. So I filled in one of those little cards, do you want to visit from the pastor?
Yeah.
And the pastor, he called me and said, "Do you want to come and talk to me?" So I went and met him in his office and told him my story. Told him, I left the Adventist church because of the investigative judgment. And he's kind of, "What's that?"
Yeah.
So I explained it to him.
Yeah.
And he just looks at me and goes, "That's blasphemy."
Wow.
He just said that. Yeah. That's blasphemy, isn't it?
Yeah.
So anyhow, I kind of got involved in this church, started going to their Bible studies, and I was loving it. And if COVID hadn't come along, I probably still would have been there.
Right. What was
Yeah.
the church again? Just a local.
It's local. It's Raymond Terrace Community Church.
Right.
Yeah. But it was a young church. It had a bunch of people, had kids, young people, old people, kind of all kinds.
Right.
They had music. I'm not a big music fan. Sorry to say that, Peter.
That's all right.
They had guitars up there on stage, and it was just a lovely church. Really, really lovely church.
Yeah.
But COVID came along, and I couldn't go to church, so I'm at home.
Yeah.
So one thing about this church, they have two pastors. I become friends with one of them. His name's Tim Blatch. If he ever watches this, a big shout out to him. He's great. He's great. He's great. Really love him. And there's another pastor, and we started talking about predestination versus free will.
Yeah.
And the two pastors were on opposite sides. One was more Calvinist, one was more Arminian. And I'm thinking, how can you coexist and be co-pastors at one church?
Yeah.
And they're kind of like, well, we can, it's not really a salvation issue. And
yes, interesting.
so, and this church, they had a few things like that. You could disagree as long as you weren't being, disagreeing on the important things like the core thing,
the core gospel teachings. Yeah.
There was room for disagreement. And
Yeah.
I thought, well, that's never been an Adventist thing, but I kind of liked it at the time. It gives, because you could say things and people would engage it rather than become defensive.
Yeah.
Nobody, not always disagreeing, but there were no fisticuffs. It's, oh, okay, well, yeah, you see it that way. I don't really think so. I see it this way.
Yeah.
I kind of liked that. But as I wasn't going to church, I started thinking about it during the COVID time, and I'm started to think, how can you know what's true? Can anything be true?
Yeah.
If it's just me interpreting, how do I know I'm not getting the wrong interpretation? I've been wrong before.
Yeah.
Now I'm starting. So I started to kind of getting a bit down on what's true. I'm finally asking the question, what is truth?
Wow.
And I'd watch sermons online, that kind of thing, but really it's not the same.
Yeah.
And I had plenty of time to think, and I'm starting to think I can understand why people become atheists.
Yeah.
Or why they become agnostic. And the more I thought about it, I thought, is anything I've ever believed true? Am I heading towards becoming agnostic? I'm starting to have, and this is starting to really, really mess with me.
Yeah.
And I thought, no, I'm not. Like I believe Jesus was real. I'd read the case for Christ. I'd studied history. I'd done sermons about the the truthfulness of Jesus being a historical figure.
I know what you mean.
I believed it. I can't. I believe Jesus is who he said he was. So no, becoming agnostic is not an option for me. But what do? I don't know. I was kind of in no man's land. So I thought, oh, well, I'll just leave it there. So the option come to go back to church, but I didn't go back. I went back one or two times, but I just wasn't there. So I just kind of, oh, well, I won't worry about it. I'll just drift along and see what happens. And then Mum died.
Oh, goodness.
So Mum's gone, and I was got to say goodbye to Mum. She'd spent a couple of months in a nursing home at the end because of her condition. She couldn't look after herself anymore. This was during another outbreak of COVID, so I couldn't go and see her all that much. But she said, I've made a friend here when I went to visit her once. Yeah, there's a really nice nun that looks after me.
Right.
Nun what? A nun? You're saying a nun's... This is what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
You've made friends with a nun?
Yeah.
I know her used to talk about nuns. And she seemed to but she didn't have any venom in her anymore about this.
Yeah.
So anyhow, I just put that aside. And then she died. And I'm thinking,
Wow.
her final friend was a nun.
Yeah.
So I put that aside. Mum's gone. Here I am, not all alone. I've got my family and everything, but I don't have my parents anymore.
Yeah.
I'm in this kind of limbo area. So I'm just doing my thing. And one day I'm watching. I've got a little room where I am now. If you looked all around me, I've got all my little hobby equipment around me. If you could see it, I sit in here doing my hobbies, and I put YouTube on in the background, and usually stuff I can listen to. And, YouTube recommends stuff, and I'm watching stuff about mountain bikes, about airplanes, about World War II history, all this kind of stuff. And then the algorithm puts up this picture, said things like 5 myths you probably believe about the Catholic Church.
Right.
Just out of nowhere. So I just scrolled past it, and I thought, no, I'll have a look at that. So I went back and I played it, and there's this guy wearing a monk's habit, a Franciscan guy.
Yeah.
And he starts talking, and I can't tell you what the myths were because I cannot find this video anymore.
Wow.
The channel's there. I cannot find this video anymore.
Yeah.
But there are about 5 or so things, and he said I believe that. That's not true. I believe that. That's not true. He debunked all of these things I believed about the church, Catholic Church. And I thought I knew what the Catholic Church taught. And then I suddenly thought, actually, I don't. I've never ever looked into it. I've only been told what they believe. Oh, well, I'll watch another video. So I watched another one and another one. And I just went through. And by the end of it, I thought, I'm not Catholic yet, but I'm thinking the Catholic Church is not what I was told it was.
Right.
It is in no way what I thought it was. They actually don't seem so evil. Maybe I can unsee why they were. There can be some good Catholics. So I started looking into this, and there are a lot of Catholic apologists online. Most of the stuff was done online, looking at videos, and I read some stuff, but I was listening to people.
Mm.
And then they started debunking all the worst things, like the Inquisition. I'd already had questions about like the 50 million killed in Inquisition. I knew that just is not possible. But I read about it, and I thought there were thousands died, not millions died in the Inquisition. And they have an explanation of why they did the Inquisition.
Yeah.
It's a bad part in history, but when you put it in the history of the times, it's not quite as bad as we think it was.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not going to convince anybody listening, but when you're open and looking at it, that's what I found. Then papal infallibility. Well, the Pope is fallible. There's only special occasions where the Pope is infallible. Then the state of the dead. That's a big one. Do we have a soul, or is it immaterial? Do we soul sleep? And I just went through list after list after thing after all the things that we didn't believe, that I told Catholics do believe, and either I'd been told something that was not true, or something was half true, or something was true, but when you look at the reasons why, there are biblical reasons why.
Mm.
Because all of these things, they were giving the reasons from the Bible. I've been told that everything, they make stuff up. They don't know their Bible. They don't read their Bible. Their beliefs are not biblical.
Yeah.
All of them are biblical. You might not accept their interpretation of it, but they're as good as any Adventist, explanation for things. So I'm starting to be convinced that maybe they're not bad.
Mm.
I'm thinking
Did you have some moments there where you were looking back, you would have been overly cautious, like all the memories of Sunday law and deception and Antichrist? Like, I imagine someone who'd not been raised in the Adventist church with that kind of narrative being presented to them almost on a weekly basis would transition through this much more easily. But can you remember some real moments of, whoa, hang on, what am I doing? I could be under the most ultimate deception.
Absolutely.
Unpack some of that for us.
Okay, so the soul. Okay, I had firmly believed, even when I was going to the community church, that you sleep.
Right.
You die and nothing happens, and then you're resurrected. However, just this morning, I remembered something. I said I had a little sister who died at childbirth.
Yes.
So I was about 5 or 6 years old at the time. And I already knew that when you died, you ceased to exist until the resurrection at that age.
Yeah.
But I remember playing in the background and imagining her spirit going to heaven.
Right.
I don't know where that came from, but I hadn't thought about that for 50 years. And I just remembered it this morning, thinking about what I'm going to talk about today. So I had something back there just for that little time.
Yeah, yeah.
And then even when I was an Adventist towards the end, I'd finally decided we do have a soul. Like there is something in us that's not just chemicals and neurons in our brain.
Yes.
But so there's got to be something in there that makes us different from other animals. This is just something I'd figured out myself, not biblical, just something I'd come up with. And I kind of had that idea, but I still thought the soul died, And then I'm starting to think, that the Catholic Church, what they're teaching is biblical, and it's pretty much in line with, it's not that different from other Protestant religions when you start looking at it. So everybody believes the soul lives on. And then so I better study this. So I looked into it. The case was convincing. I know there are texts that say the opposite. You can go both ways just doing a Bible study.
Yeah.
So, but both sides can do really compelling arguments. So I didn't know what to make of this. And then what finally tipped me over the edge was the Adventist view. Basically, there isn't a resurrection. God makes a clone.
Yeah.
God, in the resurrection, God is making a clone of you and making it think it is you.
Yeah.
But it's not you.
Yeah.
So I thought that there has to be something that carries from now all the way through. So I'm starting to accept it. But then I start thinking, is this demonic, what I'm thinking?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
Am I opening myself up to demons now? And then I'm thinking, are demons putting all this YouTube in front of me? And I started getting really bad anxiety.
Yeah.
About the weirdest things. And I remember the Christmas after all this happened, I remember I had 2 weeks off work, and I spent most of those 2 weeks sitting in the living room, could barely move, looking at my car out the window, worrying about the gearbox in my car breaking.
Wow.
I wasn't thinking about church stuff, but I started getting this really mad anxiety about weird things. And I think it's because I couldn't process these evil ideas, which I'm starting to embrace.
Yeah.
I worked past that. That was that. But I'm thinking, I think this is true. And now I'm starting to think the reason this is true is because God or Jesus established a church which would interpret the Bible for us, so we know what it says. Well, not interpret the Bible. The Bible wasn't around then. It would interpret beliefs for us, would tell us the beliefs. And I'm starting to think this is why people like the Adventists, Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, they need prophets, because people need an authority to tell them what's correct, how to view things.
It's like we're sheep. We need to have someone to blindly follow.
Yeah.
Tell us what's real.
Yeah. So now I've got to go back in time to see if I'm believing as it currently stands, I don't have a problem with most of the things the church is teaching, but is that the same church that was back then?
You're right.
And I go back, start studying history back then, start reading church fathers, which I'd avoided because I would not read any church father because they're clearly fallen away pagans. And I start seeing, no, there is a line going all the way back, right back to the apostles. some of the church fathers were disciples of the apostles. They were the apostles' students, and they're teaching stuff which the Catholic Church is teaching now, which the Adventist Church says is wrong. So either the students of the disciples apostatized, which is what we've kind of been taught, or they didn't. And then I think, well, it's ridiculous they didn't, because Jesus said, I'm going to establish a church, and my church is going to, the gates of hell will not prevail over my church. So I see a church going along. It's having its ups and downs. It has its good times. It has its bad times. But it's not the church that I was taught as an Adventist. It's not the church I read in Protestant writings. I start to see there's a lot of reformers basically made stuff up about some things. And then I start seeing, like the heroes of faith that the Adventists have, like Albigenses and the Waldensians. When you look at what they believe, they're heretics. They believe stuff now that we get them kicked out of our church. And I think, how can they be God's chain of purity when they have such heretical views? Like, for some things, I'm sure Ellen White mentions the Albigenses somewhere as part of her, heroes of faith kind of thing, and they're just wacko. So I decide I think the Catholic Church could be true. I should go to Mass. And now I'd never stepped foot in, I tell a lie. I'd been to a cathedral in Melbourne, but otherwise I'd never stepped foot in a Catholic church. I did not want to. There is one on my block. I can walk there in 5 minutes. I'd walk past it many times. In fact, I'd take my dog for a walk, and I'd hope my dog would relieve himself in front of the church. That's how I felt about it back then. I'm ashamed to say that now. So I decided I'll go to Mass to see what it's like. So I got the courage to go. I walked in, sat down, listened to it, and I thought, this is not what I was expecting. By the time I was finished, I thought, I could have brought Mum here and she could not find anything to object to in anything they've said or done. They didn't do pagan chants. They read the Bible. The things they said were biblical. The priest did a little tiny sermon, which they call homilies, which is very biblical. I thought, this is not what I was expecting. These people actually look Christian. So I thought, okay, well, I'll look into joining. I haven't made a decision to join. I'll look into joining. So I went and talked to the priest, and he said, okay, yeah, that's good. What's your history? You're an Adventist. Oh, okay. Don't know anything about Adventists. And I thought, what? Haven't you been plotting to bring us down?
Aren't we uppermost in your mind?
Yeah.
Don't we fear you more than any other Protestant religion?
Yeah. So anyhow, and he gets Wikipedia and says, oh, so your church was established by Ellen G. White. Is that correct? And yeah, that's right. Oh, okay. Very interesting. So he said, yeah, okay. So we're going to have a class before you can become Catholic. Yeah, they make sure you know what it is. You won't be accepted until you'll accept it. So you can't just walk up, I want to be Catholic. Oh, welcome in. I'll baptize you. There you go. So he said, we're going to have some classes soon. And then there was another COVID lockdown, and eventually it took 2 years before I could finally complete the progress. So I had more than 2 years to think about this and look into it and study it. And he asked me about my baptism. And I said, yeah, I was baptized when I was about 14. And he said, how were you baptized? And I said, well, in water. He said, okay, yeah, I know that. I didn't quite say that, but he said, what did the pastor say? He said, well, yeah, I baptize you in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. I said, oh, that's good. You're a Christian. I thought, what? You're accepting my Adventist baptism? I said, well, yeah, of course, you were baptized correctly. You're now a Christian. You're not Catholic. You're separated from us, but we accept you as a brother in Christ already.
Right.
And I thought, that doesn't sound right. But yeah, they did. And but then they wanted, can you get a record of your baptism? So I thought, I've got to write to the conference office. So I wrote a letter to the conference office, and once I left church, I hadn't heard anything from the church.
Yeah.
Nobody come around to try and convince me. which disappointed me a little bit. But anyhow,
Yeah, that's a common story too.
yeah. So I wrote a letter to the. I had to get a. I wrote to the church. I sent them an email to the pastor's changed to the new pastor and said, "Do you have a record of my baptism?" And they say, "No, conference might." So I wrote a letter to the conference and I said, "Look, I'm thinking of becoming Catholic. Can you give me my baptism details so I can share them with the church?" And I expected them to say no, but they're very gracious. Said, "Oh yeah, well we've searched our records. Yeah, these are the dates. Of course, we're sorry to see you go, but we really, pray for you and hope you're blessed in your journey with Christ." And I thought, is this a conference thing?
Yeah.
It was wonderful. It was really good. It kind of, my last correspondence was really good.
Yeah.
So I didn't have to get baptized. I just had to wait till Easter last year, where they accept new people into the church, and I did the things, and which is basically, they anoint you with oil and you say a few prayers and welcome you in, and after that, I was Catholic.
Right. And did you go to the priest to have the studies of these teachings, and how many teachings did you have to agree with?
The priest didn't do it. They had a group of lay members running the classes, and I didn't actually have to learn anything because I'd learned it all.
Right.
In the meantime.
Right.
So basically we just did a few little Bible studies just to make sure I had the right vibe. But when they asked, what about, do you accept do you believe that this is, God's church? Yes, I do.
Right.
What about our belief in the sacraments? Sacraments are very big: baptism and marriage and confession and penance, and there are three more, which more to do with priests. I can't remember them at the moment.
Right.
Do you accept them? Yeah, I understand. They're fine. I accept all them. And basically, well, yeah, you're good. You don't have to say, you don't have to worship Mary. For one thing, they don't worship Mary.
Right.
Some might. There are like 1 billion Catholics in the world, and you got crazy SDAs, you got crazy Catholics that get carried away. But the official church teaching is you are forbidden from trying to worship Mary.
Interesting.
But
someone did write that in the comments.
I read that comment from Ellen worshipper to Mary worshipper.
Yes.
And I was kind of neither of them, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
But you can be a Catholic in good standing and never think about Mary. It's not a requirement.
Right. Right.
So that's just one thing I wanted to get out of the way. It's a problem with Catholics, like SDAs use Christian terms that mean different to what other Christians use.
Right.
Catholics use terms which mean different to what other Christians use.
Right.
Like the word pray doesn't mean worship. It's not a synonym for worship.
Right.
The word pray is request. It's like ask.
Right.
The very old-fashioned word, I pray that you grant my request.
Right.
So that's one thing. So when people say they pray to the saints, they're not worshipping saints. They're requesting from the saints. I know we're starting to get into the really hard to accept territory. It took me 2 years to get to where I am. But that's not worshipping. That's just like asking a fellow Christian in your church to pray for me.
Right, right.
Or, the conference president, I've got this problem. Can you put a word in for me?
Right, right.
It's this kind of thing.
Right.
And I had a couple. So this kind of thing, praying, asking the saints for their intercession to help you with things like not your salvation. I was kind of like, I'm worried about this. This is where I'm starting to get. This is starting to get really different. This is not Protestant. This is really out there.
Yeah.
So, but I had an answer to that, like a really interesting answer. I was in a gym, like a basketball gym, and there was a poor little pigeon stuck inside. It had flown in, and there were some windows high up on the roof, and he was trying to get out, and he couldn't. He was just banging onto them. And the poor guy was getting tired, and I wanted to rescue him. So, and there was an open window, and I got a broom, and I'm trying to shoo him down to get him out, and all he would do is go to the other direction. Nothing I could do. It took me like 5 minutes, and the poor guy was getting tired with me, trying to help him, and I could see his feathers were all ruffled, literally. And then I thought, St. Francis of Assisi, he loved animals. If you've got a problem with animals, you ask Francis of Assisi for help.
Right.
So I didn't say anything. I just said, St. Francis, please pray that this bird will get out of this gym. And before I'd finished speaking, the bird flew out of the window.
Right.
Like, coincidence?
Yeah.
Maybe. But that was kind of one of those weird things. If it was me asking God for something directly, everybody listening who's a Christian would probably say, yes, that's a sign that God was listening to your prayer. Anyhow, that made a big impact on me, that particular thing. And then there's another time where they're talking about the teaching about angels. Angels are they've got a really deep, complex belief in angels, which sounds really too good to be true. And I'm listening to a talk, and I think this is too, this can't, how do I know if this is true or not? Because, this is not based on the Bible. This is based on tradition and that kind of thing. And while I'm listening to this talk, I remembered something happened when I was a teen, and on my P plates, I was driving an old car and had bad brakes, which would overheat. And I was driving this down a hill one day, and the brakes failed. And I had no brakes. I was going to crash into a car. And I thought, do I want to crash into the car that was stopped at the traffic light at the bottom of the hill? Time slowed down. I thought, no, that's too much trouble. I'll crash into the telegraph pole next to it. That's probably a better idea. Not really clever thinking. But I made that decision. I steered the car. I was heading for the telegraph pole, and I felt the steering wheel get yanked out of my hands. Like, I'm doing this, and I feel the steering wheel get pulled out, like with power, and go the other way. And the car skidded to a halt right behind the other traffic. And I thought, straight away, this must have been an angel. Anyhow, I'm thinking about this as I'm listening to this talk. And then the person giving the talk says, yeah, there was this priest, and they told exactly the same story that I've just told you for another person. Another, oh, wow. So I had these little things, and I thought, well, maybe God is kind of showing me that, yeah, you can believe some of these things.
Mm. So to the Catholic, there's a lot of peace in praying to certain angels and saints for guidance, relief, and even intervention.
Yeah.
I remember years ago I was in a band in New Zealand, and we had a very interesting lineup. There was a Open Brethren, Seventh-day Adventist, a Baptist, a Presbyterian, which I think over here is now Uniting Church, and the keyboard player, she was Catholic. So then we were all in this band together, having very interesting conversations whenever we were on tour. And she would often say that if she ever felt stressed about a certain thing, she would just recite a certain phrase over and over again. And often that phrase was connected to an angel or a saint. And she said, yeah, and within minutes, I just feel really good. Did you begin to learn certain phrases to help you cope with certain situations?
Not so much phrases, but certain saints, like that anxiety thing I talked about. It had started to become a feature in my life, and this is where I'm kind of thinking about saints, and I thought, is there a saint for anxiety? So there are about 4,000 saints. There's one for every occasion. So I looked it up, and I found there's a saint called Saint Dymphna, or Dymphna. And apparently she's the one that you go to for anxiety. So I thought, St. Dimna, pray for my anxiety. And it was gone almost straight away.
Wow.
And I know your first thought is, am I just talking myself in? Is this mind over matter?
Yeah.
I don't know. But I'd been trying to have mind over matter. But so when I feel the anxiety coming, St. Dimna is my go-to saint.
Right.
And it seems to be relief.
Yeah. My wife was raised Catholic, and I was the first Adventist she'd ever not only met but heard of. Growing up, she was very much there's Catholics and Protestants, and that was it. So she was surprised to hear about Adventists. By the way, she had no influence over my leaving the church, and she would be, a lapsed Catholic, I guess, in many ways. And fortunately, we combine on a very similar spiritual ideology and worldview in that department, which is great. But her mother, sadly, she passed away a couple of years ago, and she loved collecting Catholic cards. There's actually, I just quickly Googled. I'll just see if I can bring it up on the screen just to show what I'm talking about. Does this come up on the screen? Can you see
That's
that?
Saint Dimna.
Yeah, so this is the one we were talking about. Sorry, it's just gone a little bit not what I was after. See the card on the right there, and she would have lots of different cards relating to saints or angels, and they would have a nice little saying on them. And she said the same thing, that if she had stress, anxiety, and she was having to deal with, sadly, she got cancer in the end, quite young, really. She was only 71, I think. And yeah, again, this theme of interacting not only with a kind of a mind prayer connection, but with an actual card they can touch, or a statue they can see in the cathedral, or the name of a specific person associated with, like you say, reducing anxiety, this Dimtha. She found really helpful, like demonstrably so.
I've got a bunch of those cards. They're in my bag in another room, but yeah, I've got it.
That kind of thing, yeah.
That kind of thing.
And another thing that my brother-in-law often talks about, and he took me to visit an old ruin of is it Franciscan? Is that how you say it, or Franciscan?
I think it's don't know.
Yeah,
I think it's Franciscan. I think it's a ch sound.
Franciscan monastery that I don't know how many hundreds of years old it was, just in the middle of this farm paddock, and he would talk about it as we went through it, and there was a section where the scribes were, the monks, and he showed me the landscape of the area where the village used to be over here, and these were farmlands, and they were very into helping the local community, supplying food, offering work. There was a beautiful sense of this particular order. And what I also was pondering is that if the Catholics have a point of division or diversity, they view it more as a creative kind of, okay, well, Saint Francis, if you're really interested in helping community and whatever, you start your own little your side thing, an order. You start an order. In my mother-in-law's town, just down the road from where they lived, there was a what do you call where the nuns live?
The convent.
A convent, and they they're an order where they don't speak. They speak to each other, but they don't speak out into the world. And people can go by, and there's a little letterbox. They can put in a prayer request, and if they put their address, the nuns will write to them and say, "Hey, we prayed for you this week." And in the community, that brings a lot of lowering of anxiety and peace and community. So anyway, just those kind of things where there's concrete, tangible things to hold, phrases to say, prayers given to specific angels or saints, orders. Instead of having divisive fighting with each other, they can have a separate order. We could have in the Adventist church, they could have the Gospel Adventist order, and they could have the Heritage Adventist order, and flourish under their own kind of banner. I'm just saying there's some practical things about Catholicism that do seem to bring about peace and calm and contentment into the participant.
Well, they do. Like, I'll give you an example. Okay, the images and statues in churches, they're not worshipped at all. An example I'll give. The people take their Bible, they'll put it on the bed in front of them when they want to pray. They'll open it up, they'll put their finger on a text, and then they'll pray about a text. The Bible is there. It's reminding them that it's a thing for them to focus on. That's what statues and paintings do in church. It's something that focuses your mind, and it works really, really well.
And they often misconstrued, and they're told that they're worshipping those things.
Yeah.
But I know from my wife and the relatives there on that side of the family that it's not a worship thing at all.
And then you'll say something like the Hail Mary. Like, before, I knew the word Hail Mary, and I thought it was just Hail Mary, Hail Mary. I didn't know the full thing. But it goes, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed are thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of their womb, Jesus. All of that comes from Matthew and Luke. That is all biblical. And then the final part, Hail Mary. Holy, I've got to start from again. I can't start halfway. Yeah. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed are thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of their womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Okay, you might quibble about the Mother of God, but Jesus is God. She was his mother. Pray for us now, whatever we need to be prayed for. Pray for us for our needs now and at the hour of our death. Just think, you're about to die. You've got somebody close to God praying for you at that moment. That is the most comforting thing. And I love the Hail Mary. And when you do a rosary, you do repeat it, but you have to think, you have a biblical teaching, a part of the life of Christ, his crucifixion, his birth, his baptism, I'm not sure of his baptism actually, when he was scourged, when he's on the walk to the cross. As you're saying this prayer, you're meditating, thinking about a scene from the life of Christ. So rather than be, mindless repetition, it's actually a way of focusing on Christ and praying at the same time.
And bolstering that positive thought process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, if you can't go to sleep, I put it on my phone, and I've never made it all the way through a rosary.
Yeah.
I've always fallen asleep with so it's a good way to go to sleep too. I don't know if that's correct or not, but the things like the mass and all the robes, the cup, the cloth, there is a meaning to every single part of it, and it's all biblical. Either based on the Old Testament, mostly based on the Old Testament, or the story of Jesus. The cup is the Last Supper, but they put the stone on the top. Pardon me. The cloth is what he was wrapped in the tomb. Everything is a symbol. So when you know it, you just see Jesus everywhere in these symbols. And I think they've been stripped away from us. And that's a kind of a shame.
Yeah. It's interesting in our conversation today, and we'll wrap it up soon. I've noticed as you've recounted your story, you've gone from almost a sense of aimlessness, and your face and demeanor were even having a bit of a low self-esteem presentation. But as you were telling your story, working through it, I could see your confidence building in your belief in yourself, not in a selfish way at all. And then to now, as you're talking about your faith that's working for you, a shining confidence. And I think one thing I do notice in all these interviews that I do with former Adventists, they have a similar kind of stream. Now, some of them might be Baptists, or they might have gone to other local church communities, or some of them, may not be believers at all, but there is a trajectory that goes from low confidence to high confidence and a more liberated, happier life. Some, not all, I'm not saying that. And I think that that's a good thing. And I'm sure there'll be some pushback and people say, oh, yeah, but, the devil could recreate that kind of thing or whatever. But what are your thoughts as you've talked today and as you've shared this? Have you noticed in yourself an enthusiasm kind of percolating and boiling as you went through the story?
Yes. Once I got to the Catholic part, I feel like I'm not explaining myself very well. There's
No,
so
you
much.
are. That's what I'm actually saying is, I'm not saying you've started with low self-esteem and lack of confidence. I'm saying as you've shared back your story of that time, your countenance it's like you're wistfully looking back as you've shared it. And I hear that person in you of back then. And I'm so pleased that person has gone from that to where they are now.
Yeah. Well, where I am now, I'm getting excited now because there's so much I want to share.
Yeah.
There's so much, and I wish I could explain it better. All I want to say to any Adventist,
I think you're explaining it really well.
Yeah. I will say to any Adventist watching, or another version, or a Protestant watching, even if go and check out what the Catholic Church really believes. Read their sources, listen to some of their apologists. Just say because you probably don't know what they really believe.
Yeah, you've definitely.
And do that. And also, Catholics look at Protestants and Seventh-day Adventists as separated brothers,
right?
Not as the enemy. They say they accept them all as Christians as long as you've been baptized validly. You don't have the fullness, of what God has to offer, and that's what I feel now. I feel like full.
Yeah.
I feel like I've got stuff that was missing that I didn't know was missing, and now I've got it.
And that's what I'm kind of saying. I could sense straight away when we chatted that you were living that fullness. And when you were recounting the past, I could see accurately the person not living in fullness.
Yeah.
As you were sharing that story. It's hard to explain.
Perhaps that's a way to explain it.
Yeah. I could tell that you had this newfound confidence, and fullness is a good word, and harmony with life, but I could, as you were recounting it, I could see the young Robert not being able to harmonize all this stuff going on. And I think, it's a real credit to you to have gone, there's a strength that's just been growing and growing and growing. And I see that strength in a lot of former Adventists. They've gone from kind of just this incredible Ellen G. White filter. Even the progressive gospel Adventists say that they have Ellen White in the back, but she's there in the background, almost pulling the strings in so many ways. And you have, and a lot of Adventists that talk about coming out of Adventism have a confidence and a strength and a liberation that just shines, and a fullness. Can we go to a couple of questions?
Sure.
That people have just been talking about? Motor Sapien has said, he mentioned earlier he wanted you to explain about what your definition of grace is today. So Motor Sapien, no, you didn't miss it. I'm just asking Robert now, what would you say your definition of grace is now? Because it's gone through 3 stages. 1 where you didn't understand it, 2 where you did from an Adventist perspective, and now a fuller understanding. What would you say fuller understanding is?
Grace comes from Jesus. He gives it to us. It allows us to accept him. it's His grace that saves us. It is undeserved. It is unmerited. We cannot work for it. I think it's the same as the classical Protestant definition of grace. That's what grace is.
Michael C. has written, and I think it's from Matthew 6:7, but when ye pray, use not vain repetitions as the heathen do, for they think that they shall be heard for their much speaking. What are your thoughts on that when we're talking about the rosary beads and repeating certain lines? How is that different to perhaps what Matthew is suggesting?
First of all, they're not vain repetitions. They're repetitions. They're not vain. They have deep meaning. They're not just random words that you say to appease the God. As for repetitions, I already figured this out as an Adventist. You read the Psalms, they're repetitions. Repetition. Yeah. The Psalms, they repeat things.
Yeah.
And in the book of Revelation, it talks about the worthies in heaven saying, "Holy, holy, holy," non-stop.
Yeah.
That's a repetition. So it's the vain repetition is talking about people worshipping an idol. That this rock, God is in this rock. And if I just annoy it enough by saying this phrase again and again and again, God might do what I want it to do, or God might notice me. That's what he's referring to with this text here.
Yeah,
it's not talking about worshipping God through like you can praise Him again, like the chorus in a worship song.
Yeah,
it repeats.
It repeats. Yeah.
But you're worshipping God. You're not trying to get something out of God from it. This is the way you're connecting with God, worshipping God.
Yes. Yeah. As some people will say, I've heard, not in the thread today, but I've heard people say, well, the Catholic priests and all the terrible sexual abuse. The reality is that all of that abuse is happening within the Adventist church, within every denomination, within swimming clubs. It's a terrible, terrible stain of humanity that permeates more than just the Catholic priesthood.
That was a big thing I had to work through. Now, one thing, if you talk to Catholics, they'll say there have been bad priests, bad popes. They don't think everything's been sweet and rosy. There have been bad popes. There have been bad priests. But it makes up a very small percentage of priests, like the priests that have been accused of sexual scandals. I might get this number wrong, but it might be 4%, somewhere around about there, which is 4% too many, of course. But if you compare it to any other Christian religion, it's ballpark.
Yeah.
If you compare it to school teachers, it's low.
Yeah.
If you compare it to any other group in the community that has access to children, it's actually quite lower than the average. I think it's an issue because whether they like it or not, people in the Western world hold the Catholic Church up to a higher standard than they do anybody else, and rightfully so. And these days, they call it safeguarding. Is that the word they use everywhere? It's huge. They've gone to great lengths to make sure that it can't happen again. The way it's been approached has been, they acknowledge it's been bad, but all you can do is pick yourself up. And I'm sorry, I don't want to be flippant about it because people who've been hurt. Because I have talked to people whose family's been hurt, and I just bite my tongue. I don't try and excuse anything.
No.
So it's bad for the people that have been, and I can understand their the feelings they have. Maybe I can't, but in a way, I know why they can have such a a negative feeling. But it's
And I think in anywhere where like wherever there are people that have a religion that is all powerful, and there's parts of the world where Catholicism has done a lot of damage, and a lot of kind of abuse to community in so many different ways. There's classic stories that I hear from my in-laws and the family there in Ireland, of them growing up with the nuns and the terrible treatment that they got and this kind of thing. But I'm trying to tease that apart from this notion that whenever people have this kind of power that's all powerful, it's often abused. And so the Catholics and the Protestants and every organization and movement can look back at their history of having done these things. And I know people that will never set foot in a Catholic church again, but I know people that will never set foot in an Adventist church again either.
Mm-hmm.
So there does come a point where you have to look at what people are doing now to bring about change and move forward. And I think what you're saying is that you've found a fullness in that, and you've also found an accountability that the church seems to be presenting in this part of the world, at least.
Yeah. All I can know about what's written in English, but there doesn't seem to be any hiding history. Bad stuff is it was bad, and some of it, it was bad. We can't. What can we say? It was bad.
Yeah.
And other stuff, it's bad. But if you look at it in the context of the time, I can understand why they did it, because the Protestants did it, the Anabaptists did it.
Yeah.
Some things
not understand why they did it, but you can understand it in the context of
the times. It wasn't something out of the ordinary.
It was bad at an equal ratio of bad to the others.
It was bad, but dare I say it, understandable. Like Inquisitions, like Spanish Inquisition, that was brought on by the king, like the monarchy, because it was a Catholic kingdom. It worked under Catholic laws, and you didn't have to be Catholic, but there were perks to being Catholic. So Muslims and Jews would convert, so they could get the perks of being Catholic.
Yeah,
and then they wouldn't be good Catholics. So it'd cause grief.
Yeah.
So the king said, "Church, can you come in and sort these out?"
Yeah.
And so they would. And most of the people sent to the Inquisition were sent on their way. They were found innocent. Those who were found guilty were the church never killed anybody. They were handed over to the king to do with them as they would. But generally, criminals in Spain at the time, if they were found guilty, they would try and get put into an Inquisition court, because they knew they'd be dealt with better and more fairly by the Inquisition than they would in a civil court.
Right.
Something I didn't know before, because the Inquisition court, despite being the evil, nobody expects the Inquisition, they were actually wanted to get to the truth. They wanted people to come to Christ, but if they wouldn't, that they would suffer for it under the hands of the monarchy. Yeah. And if I've got that wrong, I apologise. That's what I've got from my reading.
Yeah, of your own studies. Yeah.
From my own study, but I'm not a historian.
And are you finding that you're welcomed into a local community up there in Raymond Terrace, where you're regularly going along and enjoying the church community and finding support with new friends and this kind of thing?
Yeah,
It's been hard for you?
It hasn't been hard. Not so much. There's a weird thing about Catholic churches, which I found seems to be universal. You walk into any Protestant church and you look like a stranger, the greeter's going to get you at the door. You're going to be swamped. You're going to be welcome. Generally, you'll be welcomed, made to feel at home. You walk into a Catholic church, you'll be completely ignored. And I looked on the internet. I said, "Is this common?" And apparently, everybody's asking this question. Generally, people go to church to worship God. They don't go there for socializing, for evangelizing. So they really don't care if there's a stranger coming. They're probably a Catholic from another church.
Right.
You know, everybody comes in, they attend church, and then they go home.
Yeah, interesting.
Socialization takes
There's no
place.
potluck.
There's no potluck or anything like that.
No haystacks.
And at a smaller church, like a smaller parish like I go to, that's probably all there is. So it can be a struggle for young families connecting. That is, and that's something people acknowledge, that the church needs to try and be more welcoming.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it's kind of more authentic, because also you get welcomed to a lot of churches, and until they've got you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then suddenly they've got to move on to welcoming the next person.
Yeah,
and now
that's right. Yeah. You're in now. No more pastoral care needed.
Yeah. And to the Raymond Terrace Community Church that I went to, that never happened to me. Their welcome was genuine the whole time I was there. So
yeah, okay.
if you don't want to go to an Adventist church, you don't want to be Catholic, but you're looking for a good fellowship and you're in Newcastle area, go to Raymond Terrace Community Church, and they'll make you at home.
That's not the Catholic one. That's the Raymond Terrace Community
Community Church, the Raymond Terrace Community Church. Not, do come to the Catholic Church, but if you don't want to do that, and you're looking for a church community that you'll be welcomed at, and you'll be fed, and you'll receive the gospel, I can't speak more highly of that church.
The Raymond Terrace Community Church, and that's just one-off church. It's not like a network of.
They are open brethren.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they don't advertise themselves as such, but they're not hiding it. It's there if you want to ask.
Right.
Now, one thing, there is a closed brethren, which they are really hardcore, and they won't even let you in. Open brethren, completely different.
Yeah. They're like two different churches.
It's like two different churches. People get them confused though.
So just a couple of questions to finish off from those watching. Michael C says, Robert, would you say the Catholic Church is the mother church calling her children home?
Yes, I would.
Let's see what Chris Lucas says. Hey, Chris. I grew up going to the Church of Christ on Sunday, and it wasn't until I was 30 years old that someone told me about the Sabbath, and I started observing it, but I never was a Seventh-day Adventist. Oh, that's interesting. I thought that you were.
Regarding the Sabbath and the Catholics, if you want to keep the Sabbath, the seventh-day Sabbath, you can do that and be a good Catholic, because you can go to Mass on the Sabbath if you want.
Yeah.
They have Mass every day of the week, actually.
That's right. It's
but yeah, you can keep the Sabbath as you would as a Seventh-day Adventist, and still go to Mass and still be Catholic, should you want to.
Yeah. Michael says, Jesus called repeating prayers as vain, not me. Yeah, I think what Robert was saying, I don't want to put words in Robert's mouth, but it is the repeating of vain prayers.
Yes.
Not good. It's not that repeating prayers is vain.
Exactly.
If your approach and intention is vanity, and you're just repeating and without even knowing what you're saying or doing, and that's different to repeating prayers. There is a lot of repetition of prayers and words in the Bible. So it's not that Jesus wasn't saying that the repeating of prayers is vain. He was saying the repeating of vain prayers is not good. Andy says, after Adventism leaves its gaping wounds, I can understand anyone going almost anywhere afterwards. She's not suggesting that you've just done a knee jerk.
No, of course not.
But, and Motor Sapien says, Andy Mack, unfortunately, that's very true. Running from something that you can't rationalize to another thing that you ultimately can't rationalize leads many to atheism. And Andy Mack adds, I'm almost jealous Robert has found something. Because Andy has kind of she's shared a lot in the comments, and she's been on a journey, I'd say, am I right, Andy, out of Adventism, and I can sense that you're feeling like you're wanting to find somewhere.
Well, maybe I'll have my experience, maybe not being Catholic, but I was not looking for this. I I was in, as the Adventists like to say, the valley of despair.
Yeah.
I was heading into that, and I wasn't really looking to get out of it.
Yeah.
And then suddenly this was there, right out of the blue.
Yeah. Yeah. And Andy says, sometimes I wish I could still be an ostrich. Hey, well, you're part of the SDA church, Andy. I'm not sure what Michael says here. You're doing a great job in your presentation. Please be careful. I'm not sure. Are you worried, Michael, see that he's going to lead people astray?
I ask anybody if they have anything, questions about the Catholicism. You go to the Catechism and see what that says, that lays it all out. And then it won't be somebody leading you astray. The Holy Spirit will either guide you or won't guide you. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I feel like we could get you back and just talk about the joys of your newfound. Today we've talked about the journey from where you were to where you are, and as you were talking about, particularly when you talk about anxiety and Saint Dimtha, I could just see this fullness being expressed from your heart. It was starting to really shine from you, and maybe we can get you back and we can just do like an hour talk on what these various sort of practices are and experiences are and beliefs are that have brought about this joy that's obviously shines from you.
Sure.
That'd be good.
Yeah, there could be some surprising things, like things you wouldn't think, like confession, penance, all of those kind of things, scary things. They're actually beautiful things once you understand them and know how to approach them.
Yeah. Well, we will say farewell for now. I've got a little chart over here. I write who's next. And next week we've got Andrew Skeggs and Logan Smith. We're going to be chatting a little bit about how formers are sometimes treated with a little bit of a lack of empathy after they've left the church, and how friendships can be maintained. So that's I'm really looking forward to that. And we're going to be chatting to Nancy Claiborne as well next week. And then the week after, we've got Rochelle Seminowicz, who is that author that she went from Adventism into a polyamorous relationship and has written a book about it. And she's not there anymore. She's still on a journey. So we've got some very interesting conversations coming up, everyone. And don't forget, if you're, I'm thinking, Robert, and you're welcome to join us. I'm thinking of having a retreat next year in Hawaii or Fiji around this time next year. So if you guys,
how nice would that be?
It'll be fantastic. We're just going to hang out, and we'll basically have a conference room, and we'll have some guests sharing their stories, but basically lots of beach time, good food, camaraderie, just chatting at the SDA&A church community church. And if those want to support what I am doing, I do 2 shows a week, and there's the QR code if you'd like to support what I'm doing. I've just completed the website for SDA&A, almost complete, and I was going to show everyone today, but for some reason I can't get the link to work, so I'll share that in the Facebook group and on YouTube next week as well. So all those costs of hosting and monthly fees and podcast hosting and restream hosting, it all adds up. So those of you that have been making donations of $2-3, believe me, it really helps and adds up. So thank you very much. Thanking again my very special guest today, Robert Woolley, as he shared his story from Adventism to Catholicism. I've loved every minute of it, Robert, and really enjoyed getting to know you better.
Well, it's been a pleasure.
It's been great. And let's catch up at Double Take in Toronto, which is about halfway between where you are and where I am now. And we'll shoot the breeze some more.
Let's do that one day.
Awesome. Thanks, Robert.
Okay, thanks.
Send up some love hearts, everybody, and we'll look forward to catching you all again next week. See you later.
Okay, bye.